Chapter 461 Heart of the Kingdom. The air within Demonstone Castle was heavy with the weight of unspoken histories as Rowena, Asher, and Nada crossed the threshold into a room shrouded in shadows and silence. In this hidden floor of the castle, there was not another soul in sight. No guards or servants would dare enter this floor even if they knew of its existence. The door's loud creak broke the stillness, a sound that seemed to echo across centuries, revealing a space untouched by time or demon presence. Asher, with a heavy heart, recalled the stories that whispered of the Devourer's decree. This sanctum was to remain sealed, its secrets undisturbed, save for a moment of dire need for the kingdom. He knew this was why no king had disturbed this room ever since the Devourer was gone. They all respected his wish and stuck to it no matter what. Rowena was also feeling regretful that she had to be the first to disturb this place and for a dire situation like this. "Are you sure this is the best place to place this key?" Rowena asked Nada, her voice a blend of doubt and hesitation. Nada's response was firm, her nod conveying her certainty. "The Supreme One told His Majesty that the key should be placed in the heart of the kingdom. From what we came to know, this room we are standing in was the very place the Devourer buried his people." Broken bar her words trailed off as certain memories flashed in her mind. Asher, gazing down at the ground beneath their feet, was consumed by the gravity of their actions. The foundation of their kingdom, he realized, was built not just on Raziel's aspirations but literally atop the blood and bones of his loved ones. He knew Raziel did it because it was the only way he knew to be always close to them and never forget them. Despite this being related to some other person, he felt it deeply. "Then let's begin." With a resolute breath, Rowena initiated the ritual, her hand weaving through the air. A cascade of mystical objects, stones, amulets, weapons each imbued with a dark, mystical essence, clattered to the floor. Their glow, a dance of dark light, illuminated the room with an otherworldly aura. Asher, witnessing the gathering of so many Devias, felt a twinge of unease. The noble houses had relinquished these divine artifacts with reluctance, uncertain of their return. Yet, the need of the hour compelled them to part with these cherished items, a sacrifice for the greater good. He knew no house would have parted away with their Devias this easily if not for the survival of their kingdom. But he let Rowena use his Devia, and he also knew she would have included hers if not for the fact that her Devia was most vital for the kingdom. He could only hope this key wouldn't be too hungry and devour every Devia they were going to feed it. Otherwise, he had no doubt Rowena would use her Devia in the worst case. "You can take it out now," Rowena prompted, her gaze fixed on Asher. With a solemn nod, he reached into his robe and drew forth the crimson hilt. With a flex of his hand, the blade extended, a crimson counterpart to his stature, its presence commanding and ominous. The blade's glow, subtle yet pervasive, cast a glow that was both menacing and magnificent. Even Rowena and Nada momentarily held their breath under the ominous light and aura emanating from it. They couldn't even sense such an aura from it until Asher revealed it. Asher wished he could learn more about this key named Void Reaver. Was it really just meant to be a key or something more? Why didn't Dracarys even remotely mention any other uses of this key? Was he worried that he might misuse it? He felt troubled when he remembered the conversation between the Moon Guardian and that woman named Luna, who was supposed to be Sati. "You can now embed it in the center of the array," Rowena said after making sure the array was working as expected. It was something prepared by at least 100 experts before it was handed over to her. Asher, surrounded by the eerie glow of the Devias, each radiating with a dark, chilling light interconnected by strands of ethereal energy and encased within a circle of crimson runes, felt the weight of duty upon his shoulders. He raised the sword, its crimson hue a stark contrast against the darkness, and whispered in a solemn voice, "Protect our kingdom as long as you can." With those words, he plunged the sword into the heart of the glowing array. The immediate reaction was visceral, a surge of power that rippled through the very foundation of the castle. The Void Reaver, now embedded in the array, became the epicenter of a force so potent it caused the ground to tremble, its dark radiance spreading in all directions, painting the room in a wash of crimson light, making all three stumble back. The three could only watch with widened eyes as the sword acted as a conduit, drawing energy from the surrounding devices. The air was charged with anticipation, the very castle itself seeming to hold its breath, as the array and the sword became one. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the tremors ceased. From the sword burst forth a semi-transparent crimson sphere, its expansion swift and relentless. It grew beyond the confines of the room, its boundary pushing past the castle walls, enveloping the kingdom in its embrace. Rowena, her eyes closed in concentration, utilized the sight afforded to her by the castle's eyes. She watched, her heart racing, as the sphere extended over dozens of kilometers, a protective dome that shrouded their kingdom. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished, leaving behind a charged silence and a kingdom shielded by a mystical force. Outside, the people of the kingdom, their daily lives interrupted by the sudden manifestation, stood in collective astonishment. The sight of the crimson sphere, a phenomenon both beautiful and bewildering, sparked a flurry of questions and speculation. What magic was at work? Did it have anything to do with the protection of their kingdom? They had already heard rumors that their king had returned with the means to protect their kingdom from the Draconians. It was the only rumor that settled down most of their fears. Back within the castle, relief washed over Asher and Nada as Rowena said, "It worked. We will be all right." A broken bar for now. Yet, amidst the triumph, Asher's voice carried a note of concern, a reflection of the responsibility he felt. "How long do you think all these devices would last?" Rowena's expression was a mirror to the gravity of their situation. "I had not foreseen such a malevolent thirst in the key, a danger too great for us to withstand for long," she admitted, her gaze locked on the array that pulsed with a foreboding light. "In the realm of possibility, we stand to wield this power for 3 to 4 years. But the future is unpredictable, and the decay of the devices could erode our windows swiftly." Asher's face hardened at her words, the reality of their precarious future settling in. "Then it means we have to somehow become stronger than Draconi's kingdom within this short time." No. Not only the Draconians but also the werewolves, especially the Moonbinder clan now that their guardian is back from the dead. "There is no telling when they might attack our kingdom. We can't trust an enemy to honor a pact their ancestor made." As he spoke, Asher's mind raced with plans and possibilities. Not only should he somehow strengthen his kingdom but also make himself stronger as well. At least strong enough to take down Lupus, who was the strongest of all demons. Once he has absolute power in this realm, so many things will become easier. Nada's agreement was swift. "You are right, my king. In the meantime, we would need all the allies we can get. I will let Vernon know how important this is, and then my house will do everything we can to prepare for the worst." Rowena nodded, her brows furrowed as she voiced her concerns. "Even if we prepare for the worst, we will be left vulnerable once this key devours all the devices of our kingdom. So we have to be prepared before this key leaves us weaker than ever in the history of our kingdom." Asher, sensing the weight of responsibility on their shoulders, offered a moment of reassurance, placing his hand on Rowena's shoulder. "Don't worry. I won't let anything happen to our kingdom. I already have some plans." His thoughts drifted to the necessity of continuing his reaping activities, venturing into Earth to sow the seeds of his cult that would indirectly serve as both shield and sword for his kingdom. Rowena's expression softened as his words made her heart less heavy. "I know you will. Even now, we wouldn't have been able to protect our kingdom if you had not turned this key. Our people couldn't be more proud to have you as their king." Nada's soft chuckle echoed as she said with a smile, "Then doesn't this deserve a celebration? Our people's spirits will be lifted, and we can let everyone know they can rest at ease. It's not always that we get a chance like this. Isn't that right, my king?" Asher looked at Nada and saw the look in her eyes, knowing she was talking about the celebration Raziel never got to have with Selene and his people. Rowena narrowed her eyes as she noticed the atmosphere between the two becoming a bit strange before she said, her voice reverting the mood back to normal, "Then we shall do just that." The damned demon by resurgent. Damned Demon Chapter 462 to 487 Chapter 462 A mother's helplessness in the heart of the Bloodburn Kingdom. A wave of relief and jubilation swept through the streets, echoing off the ancient stone walls and filling the air with a palpable sense of hope. The Queen's official proclamation had ignited a spark of joy among the populace. Their king had erected a powerful barrier around the kingdom, a shield against their foes, ensuring their safety from the Draconians and other enemies that lurked beyond their borders. The source of this miraculous protection was whispered to be a powerful artifact, a reward from the king's triumphant venture into the Tower of Torment, and his shocking ascension to a soul devourer only added layers to the legend that was rapidly unfolding around him. It wasn't just long ago he became a peak soul purger. Just when they thought he couldn't astonish them more, they happily get proven wrong again. The Queen also announced that the kingdom was set to celebrate their king's achievements and his safe return with 10 days of festivities, allowing everyone a chance to shower him with their love and admiration and also honor the ones who died for him. The streets buzz with preparations, the air filled with anticipation for the days of joy that lay ahead. Yet, not all corners of the kingdom basked in the warmth of the forthcoming celebrations. Within the secluded confines of Bloodwing Manor, an ominous shadow loomed, starkly contrasting the joyful atmosphere that filled the rest of the kingdom. The manor usually had an unsettling atmosphere, though today, it was shrouded in a chilling silence, broken only by the somber procession of servants. Tension gripped the air as the servants, their bodies tense with fear, dragged the bloodied remains of a maid who had unwittingly knocked on their mistress' door to her room without having any idea that she didn't want to be disturbed. They could only sigh and blame the maid for being too concerned after hearing that their mistress' eldest son was captured by the Draconians. They all knew how much their mistress coddled the eldest one, and even if a hair on his body was hurt by someone, her wrath would make them regret it dearly. So all of them were even more terrified than ever since they couldn't imagine how angry and upset she must be right now. However, the sudden sound of footsteps heralded the arrival of Sren, the master of the manor, whose presence momentarily diverted the servants from their grisly task. His sigh, heavy with resignation, did little to dispel the atmosphere of dread that hung like a shroud over the corridor. "Clean it up, and don't bother coming to this floor unless she wants," he instructed, his voice a calm command amidst the storm of fear that enveloped his home. With a mind burdened by the knowledge of what awaited him, Sren pushed open the door to Rebecca's chambers. The scene that greeted him made his brows raise. It was one of chaos and despair, a stark departure from the grandeur that typically defined the manor. Rebecca knelt among the wreckage of her own making. The room, a mirror to her turmoil of furniture, lay in ruins. Shards of glass bottles glittered menacingly among drops of spilled blood, and the stench of despair hung heavily in the air. As Sren stepped into the chaos that once was a room of elegance and order, his voice carried the weight of disappointment and reprimand. "What is this, Rebecca? I know you are upset, but you didn't have to wreck your room and kill a poor maid. Taking your anger out on them isn't the solution." "Upset? Ha ha ha." Rebecca's response was a chilling laugh, a sound that seemed alien in the desolate atmosphere of the room, and then turned her head around to face Sren. Her silver hair, usually a symbol of her regal bearing, now hung in disarray, framing a face contorted by anger. "Your eldest son got thrown into a dungeon by the Draconians, and all you have to say is that I shouldn't be angry? Or do you really not care about his life and death but the life of some wretched maid? Why am I not surprised? You still haven't changed." Sren's expression hardened while Rebecca went on, "How can you remain so calm when he might be getting tortured every second as we speak?" The turmoil in her pale red eyes was a storm of despair and rage, a mother's fury unleashed. Sren, navigating the debris of shattered furniture and broken dreams, approached her, an attempt at reasoning in his tone. "I am worried about Oberon, but we should." His plea was cut short by the sight of the map sprawled before Rebecca, a detailed blueprint of enemy territory. Seized by a sudden urgency, he grasped the wrist, his voice sharpening with concern. "What madness is this? Are you planning to sneak into their kingdom?" Rebecca's reaction was swift and snarled as she shook his hand away. "Then you tell me how to rescue him. If you can't, Then stay out of my way. I will do whatever it takes to get him out, even if I have to go there myself. Sren's frustration was palpable as he countered her reckless determination with harsh reality. Are you even listening to yourself? Whenever it concerns Oberon, you can't think straight. Just think ... Even if you manage to get inside their kingdom without any troubles or with the help of someone you know on the inside, you can't get past the dungeons. It is heavily guarded, and if you get caught, then not only will you be punished, but your son will be executed in front of you. At least now, he is still alive, isn't he? Do you really want to get your son killed? The impact of his words seemed to pierce the veil of Rebecca's fury, her resolve wavering as the grim possibilities he outlined took root. Yarg! With a frustrated kick, she sent the map skittering across the floor with her foot, though her spirit remained unbroken, trapped in a tumult of despair and helplessness. Sensing a shift, Sren ventured a suggestion, a lifeline amidst the storm. Why don't you try talking to our king? He is now powerful and influential enough to maybe carry out some negotiation or do something about it. It isn't good for him as well if a prince of our kingdom is being imprisoned by the Draconians. He may not want to lose face. In the throes of her turmoil, Rebecca's reaction to Sren's suggestion was a mix of scorn and disbelief. Are you trying to mock me or help me? You want me to ask for his help after everything he did to us, especially Oberon? Her words were laced with accusation, unable to believe Sren would bring up his name as the solution. I am sure that the only reason our son was captured was because that alien bastard did something. Otherwise, how could it be possible that they all escaped while only he was left behind? He was the strongest, except for Eradicator and Nada. Sren, his patience wearing thin, countered with a firmness born of realism. We don't know that for sure, and you should be careful with your words. Asher is no longer the soulless boy who helplessly slept on a bed all day long. His power and reputation will soon equal or surpass the Queen in no time. Whether you like it or not, he is the best chance you have right now. Nobody else will be able to help you. The tension between them escalated as Rebecca, her emotions boiling over, challenged Sren. Then why don't you go and ask him? Or is it that you want to abandon Oberon? That must be something you have been secretly hoping for, right? Sren's frustration was evident as he retorted. Stop making up things I never even said. The only reason I am not asking is because I believe it is prudent to wait and see how things unfold. Recklessly doing something now could make things worse. It is only for your sake that I suggested seeking Asher's help. Rebecca scoffed as Sren turned around and walked towards the door. But if you don't want to, then forget I said anything. Just don't do anything to make things worse, Sren said, leaving the room while Rebecca's brows were twitching, her heart pounding in frustration, anger, and helplessness. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the study hall of Demonstone Castle offered a stark contrast to the strife in Bloodwing Manor. Asher, seeking solace in the company of Rowena, gently pushed open the door to check on Rowena after giving her some time to rest, but he sighed helplessly upon finding her already immersed in her duties. Even without the physicians doing anything, her body's rapid healing process already made her alright, but he knew that didn't mean she wasn't exhausted after everything she went through. Her piercing gaze, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the parchments scattered before her, but her mind was elsewhere. Rowena raised her gaze and had her expression softened upon seeing him coming in. I thought you might be sleeping since you didn't show your face for a couple of hours, so I didn't want to disturb you. You should be the one sleeping. Asher chuckled wryly as he remembered getting smothered by Marina's breasts for a while after she literally cried before she even learned of Sati's condition because of the upsetting rumors she had been hearing about him before he returned. But after learning about Sati's condition, she broke down even more and wanted to see Sati, though he explained to her that she had to wait until Ygritte healed Sati. He also wanted to ask Marina about the woman named Luna who manifested in Sati's body, but he knew she wasn't in the state to answer and he also didn't want to shock her in case she had no idea. And then, somehow, he ended up consoling her on the bed for a few hours until she dozed off. He felt it was better she got some rest like that since she seemed as if she hadn't slept for days. Worried for him. Oh ... I wouldn't have minded even if you did. but I can't express enough how much I missed you, even if I was only away for a short while." In one swift motion, he crossed the room, closing the distance between them, and enveloped Rowena in a fierce embrace. He had no idea that he missed feeling her supple body in his embrace and the warmth of her skin. "I missed you more." Their lips met in a searing kiss as Rowena raised her head while cradling his face. Passion ignited between them, fueled by the time spent apart, an eternity in their world. Asher's fingers wove themselves into Rowena's silky black hair, deepening the kiss further still, as if trying to erase every moment they were forced to spend apart. Rowena's pale cheeks flushed, betraying the warmth that spread throughout her body at finally being able to have him back in her embrace, safe and sound. Even if it wasn't long, she yet again realized how she can't stay alone for too long without her man. A shiver ran down her spine, awakening dormant desires, as she breathed in the alluring scent of Asher's blood, potent and tantalizing. Unconsciously, her fangs threatened to extend, eager to taste what she craved most. Unable to help herself, she broke the kiss and left trails of kisses along his cheek, her fangs grazing his skin, mapping the veins that throbbed just beneath the surface before. Finally, her fangs found their mark on his skin. In a broken bar, Asher let out a soft groan of pleasure and subtle pain as her fangs dipped into his neck while he was a bit surprised by her act. Usually, she would hesitate and ask his permission if she could drink his blood, since she wouldn't want to force him into doing it or make herself seem like a woman who couldn't control her thirst. But now, for her to crave his blood to this extent made him smile softly as he realized that she missed him that much. Rowena drank greedily, savoring the sweet ambrosia that flowed freely from the vein. It was a heady experience, the combination of the exquisite flavor and the knowledge that it belonged to the man she loved more than anything else. But Asher was not one to sit still. With a feather-light caress, his fingertips danced upwards from her waist, tracing the contours of her slender frame until they reached the swell of her deep cleavage. Slowly, deliberately, he cupped her voluptuous bosom, causing a gasp to escape her lips as the sensation sent waves of pleasure coursing through her veins. His thumb brushed against the fabric covering her round nipple, teasing it to hardness as her breathing grew ragged. Despite being preoccupied with quenching her thirst, Rowena found herself unable to resist the carnal desire that sparked within her at his touch. She arched her back slightly, pressing herself further into his hand, as if silently urging him to continue exploring her body even as she maintained her grip on his neck. Asher obliged willingly, kneading her firm yet soft breast with just enough pressure to heighten her arousal. He knew her well too well and understood precisely how to manipulate her responses. Each stroke brought forth another sigh, another shudder, until eventually, he slipped his hand beneath the fabric confining her curves, seeking direct contact with her sensitive skin. Asher sighed in pleasure, not only from feeling his blood flowing into her warm mouth but also upon feeling her soft, heated mound of flesh in his palm and feeling her skin shiver under his touch was just icing on the cake. He felt he should shower her with his love right here and now, but then he remembered how she got heavily injured, and even if she looked all right on the outside, she still needed some rest before getting back into top shape. Asher's question that followed was tinged with skepticism, a logical mind grappling with the ethereal nature of myth. When you say the essence of the moon ... how does it work actually? I mean ... it's not like the moon is a person, right? And the only way a bloodline can be passed down is through ... sex or giving up their blood force. So I am a bit confused here, he admitted, his attempt to make sense of the mythical sounding less than convinced. Rowena, momentarily taken aback by his blunt interpretation, cleared her throat as she said, "Like I said, it's just a myth. You don't have to believe every word of it. Some of it could be true, or all of it could be exaggerated, or maybe ... we don't really know." Asher nodded as he let out a loud sigh. A broken bar. They can even see glimpses of the future. I can see why the werewolves see them like gods. Asher's brows furrowed as he remembered what Lupus and Luna talked about before they fought ... something about him destroying the world. At that time he couldn't think clearly, but now, He frowned as he wondered if there was also some stupid prophecy among demons that he was going to destroy them or something. Will these demons turn against him as well? Such a thought made his heart clench tightly, especially when he thought of the people he loved. Would they kill him by believing they would be saving their world, or would they stand by him no matter what kind of dumb prophecy spreads around? He didn't even want to imagine such a scenario, but if the Moon Guardian wanted to, he could have spread rumors of such prophecy, but he didn't. This made him wonder what kind of plans that old monster was cooking. What are you thinking about? It doesn't seem like it's anything good, Rowena said upon observing his face that briefly turned somber. Asher shook his head and smiled as he held her hand and softly kissed it. I was wondering whether I should just let you be, but now that you enjoyed feeding on my blood, how about you let me make your night exciting to make up for the blood I lost? Rowena's cheeks flushed as she briefly looked away. No matter how many times she had seen him trying to shamelessly bully her in bed, she still couldn't get used to saying yes with a straight face. It usually ended up with him sweeping her off her feet as if he was asking her just to make it seem like she agreed to it, but then she suddenly remembered something that made her eyes narrow. Asher was about to pull her up with a smirk, but his brows raised when Rowena suddenly got up and stopped him with her hand on his chest. I would love to compensate you, but before that, I want to confirm one important thing. Confirm what? Asher was visibly taken aback, not expecting her to suddenly look serious. Is something going on between you and Nada? You trusted her enough to let her hold onto the key for a while and convinced me to bring her inside that room. I know you are not someone who easily trusts people. Oh fuck. Asher winced on the inside as he wasn't expecting this bomb to drop now. I hope it's not an answer I don't want to hear, she asked, her gaze piercing while Asher's breath froze. The air thickened with tension as Asher faced Rowena, her question hanging between them like a sword. Why were women so perceptive? But he knew that even if Rowena didn't ask, he was going to tell her himself, though now he wasn't exactly prepared to break the news to her. You see, Asher stumbled, his voice trailing off, a man ensnared by his own heart's rebellion. Asher felt he would rather fight the Moon Guardian again than be in this situation. Rowena's gaze, icy and penetrating, sought the truth he hesitated to unveil. You really did it. Didn't you? You slept with her and her feelings for her? Her accusation, sharp and unforgiving, pierced the veil of uncertainty, laying bare the turmoil within. With a heavy heart, Asher sought to articulate the complexity of his feelings. It's actually a bit more complicated than that, he began, his hands raised in a futile attempt to bridge the chasm his words had wrought. Rowena's disappointment was a palpable force, her voice a blend of disbelief and reproach. How can you do that? Did you forget who she is? You could have picked any woman but to go after a married woman who is also the lady of House Valentine. I didn't expect this from you. Do you realize the consequences of what you did? The depth of her disillusionment, mirrored in her eyes, weighed heavily upon him. She was also disappointed and angry at Nada for seducing her husband despite being a respected and high-ranked senior in this kingdom. Did she do it because he was the king now? She never thought Nada was that kind of woman. Asher's defense was a confession of vulnerability. I didn't want to go after her, okay? I wasn't planning to fall in love with her as well. I tried my best to keep my feelings in check, but the Tower of Torment changed something in me. Asher began to explain what happened in the Tower of Torment as Rowena's anger in her eyes started to cool down. She had no idea he suffered so much during the trial, having to fight for survival without his own memories or strength, but having to watch the people he loved die again and again so many times was the worst torture to the soul. She also had no idea her ancestor also suffered and endured the same before he became the man everyone he knew. Her heart clenched, feeling bad for getting upset at Asher without hearing him out. However, she knew he needed to be reprimanded, but seeing how he managed to clear the trial without having his soul broken, made her feel proud to be his wife. It made her realize how much he cared about the people he loved more than power. She knew if it was any other man in this place, they would happily sacrifice everything for greater power, especially if they believed it was the only way to end their suffering. The anger and disappointment she was feeling initially began to dissipate as she couldn't bring herself to stay that angry at him after learning about what he went through. It also seemed the trial did really change or influence him in a way. Maybe Nada also got influenced. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for a woman like her to throw away her self-respect and act in such an indecorous and shameless way. It was also extremely risky for her to engage in such an act, since if even a single rumors got out, it would be over for her. Nada also never struck her as such kind of a woman from the years she knew her. However, despite understanding all this, she didn't want to let him off easy since, in the end, he did make a choice. So you developed feelings because of my ancestors' memories and feelings? Are you blaming him now? She asked with her arms crossed and her icy gaze still piercing into his soul. Grasping her arms gently, Asher sought to affirm his sincerity, his voice imbued with earnestness. I am not blaming him, I am just saying that I couldn't control it. I am not saying I am not at fault here. It just suddenly happened before I could do anything, even though Nada did try to stop me. It's the whole truth. Asher knew it was wrong to get involved with a married woman, but now that things happened, there was no going back. He also didn't want Rowena to think of Nada in a bad light, nor did he want to let go of Nada. Rowena's response, a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of her thoughts, signaled a shift in the storm. I know you are telling the truth, and I know that you weren't planning for all this to happen. I also understand that the trial did influence your feelings to a great extent, but, her words trailed off, leaving Asher in suspense, his breath caught in a balance of her judgment and grace. But you really don't know how to control this thing you call your little dragon, do you, even after Nada tried to stop you? Rowena said with a narrowed gaze while her extended forefinger pressed onto his crotch, her sharp nail threatening to pierce through. Asher's muscles unconsciously tensed as he wryly chuckled and said, it wouldn't be a dragon if I knew how to fully control it, right? But that's also one reason why I can't stay away from you. He felt like he was walking on a very thin rope and winced slightly as he felt the pressure from her finger increasing. For Rowena to act like this, she must be really upset and mad. He had never seen her like this. Rowena shook her head. Flattery won't get you anywhere, but if you really can't control it like you say, do you need my help? I read from somewhere that I can employ ancient arts to manipulate the blood in your body in such a way that your little dragon will only rise and obey me even when I am not near you. As she said, her crimson eyes seemed to flicker with an ominous light. Asher's eyes widened as he unconsciously grabbed onto her finger that was pressing onto his crotch. Wait a minute, you can't be serious, right? Asher couldn't read her thoughts or emotions from her icy face. He didn't believe she would do something like that, but then again, she was a demon, and they can get quite unpredictable. He can't imagine his little dragon getting crippled like that. It felt almost as bad as becoming soulless, but to his relief, Rowena suddenly took a step back as she lowered her finger and looked at him with a hint of amusement in her eyes. Did you really believe that? Asher chuckled in disbelief as he planted his hand against his forehead. Who taught you to mess with me like this? And did you really learn any such so-called ancient arts? Asher didn't expect Rowena to tease him in such an unsettling way, though he could see how she would only know how to tease like that. Rowena's lips broke into a soft, amused smile as she said, while you were away, I visited certain libraries in our kingdom in disguise to learn ways to make you happier as your wife. It was in one of such places where I found a hidden archive that explained ancient methods women used on their men to ensure absolute and undivided attention from their husbands. I never expected there were women who would use such methods to strengthen their bond with their husbands. Rowena's eyes briefly glowed with wonder, as if she was still intrigued by the existence of such arts. Strengthen their bonds? Asher let out a scoff of disbelief and added, Rona, you shouldn't go to these bad places and read these immoral arts. I am sure only depraved women used such arts. Next time you want to know something, you can ask me. His voice, though gentle, carried an undertone of protective reprimand. Asher felt Rowena was innocent when it came to matters like these and was afraid that these debased books and archives might corrupt her. If anyone should corrupt her, it should be him. Rowena felt the corners of her lips tingling upon seeing him getting this worked up when she only read such things out of curiosity and had no plans to use them. She would never want to cage the man she loved like that, but she found it amusing to tease him like this. She then added, "Sati was the one who told me that you love your little dragon more than your own life and that you are very proud of it. So she asked me to teach you a small lesson to make sure you would keep it in check. Only now, I realized that she was completely right. I should have warned you earlier, Sati. I should have known." Asher chuckled, shaking his head in fond exasperation, acknowledging the possessive streak he knew all too well in Sati. Yet, as his laughter faded, concern for her well-being resurfaced. "I should now go and check up on her. She might be awake now." Rowena nodded as she said, "You should do that. I will go and see her once I am done here." But, Rowena's brows furrowed as she added, "I know I don't have to say this, but now that things have already happened and I know you aren't going to give up on her, I still want your word that you won't do anything that would compromise yourself or this kingdom. Our kingdom is living through a dangerous time where we can't afford to upset certain people." Asher knew Rowena was indirectly telling him to be discreet about his relationship with Nada. Asher's assurance was immediate, his smile filled with the sincerity of his intentions. "Of course, I am not that out of control to not be careful. I am really sorry about how things unfolded, but I promise I will fix all this in my own way. I just need some time." His words were a balm to Rowena's unspoken fears as she nodded. "I know, but one day or the other, you will still have to deal with the consequences, including Vernon and House Valentine. I hope you will know how to handle it in the right way." Asher's expression turned serious as he nodded. "I will." "With that out of the way, what are you going to do about Oberon? I know he isn't a prince this kingdom needs, but it is bad for our kingdom to let him remain imprisoned, and everyone thinks we are not doing anything to help one of our own. We can't afford to seem callous at a time like this," Rowena said with a serious expression. Asher narrowed his eyes as the gears in his mind turned before he answered with a smile, "I will deal with it, just leave it to me." Asher felt that he could use this golden opportunity to strike two birds with one stone. Rowena blinked as she felt surprised to feel the confidence in his voice, though she decided to leave it to him as he said. But suddenly, she remembered what Lysandra said to her when she tried to get to Asher's unconscious body. Why did it seem like she wasn't trying to capture or kill him but something else? The thought lingered in her mind as she saw Asher walk out of the hall. The ambience of City's recovery room was a gentle cocoon, swathed in the soft, healing scent of medicines, a stark contrast to the tumultuous events that had led them here. Asher stepped into the space with worry and concern. He came alone since he wanted to make sure of some things before the others came in. Other than wanting to know if she was all right, he was greatly disturbed by the words Luna and Lupus said, and if City remembers any of it, the sight of Ygritte and the attending physicians, their mana flowing like a serene river around City, provided a soothing bubble that enveloped City's figure. Upon seeing their king come in, the physicians, including Ygritte, bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, how is she?" Asher asked with a concerned look as he looked at the peaceful face of City sleeping. He was relieved to see that at least all the injuries she suffered seemed to have healed. He wasn't surprised since she could naturally heal her injuries fast. Ygritte gestured at the other physicians to leave as he said with a reassuring smile, "Do not worry, Your Majesty. She is already recovered and fit as a wolf. We didn't wake her up because we wanted to remove the exhaustion from her body and make sure she would wake up revitalized. I can wake her up now if you wish to speak to her." His words, imbued with professional calm, promised a respite from the fears that had accompanied Asher into the room. With a nod, Asher approached, his every step measured, as Ygritte's practiced touch summoned City back to consciousness. The gentle mana, a whisper of life's energy, coaxed her eyes to flutter open, heralding her return from the realm of healing slumber. "I will be right outside if you need anything, Your Majesty," Ygritte offered, his departure as discreet as his entrance, leaving Asher and City enveloped in the fragile bubble of their reunion. City's awakening was a tumult of memory and sensation. the sharp recollection of her confrontation with the Moon Guardian sending her into a state of pain and near death. Her eyes widened, and she sat up with a loud gasp, her body unconsciously tensing to fight. Yet, Asher was there, his hands a calming presence on her shoulders, gently letting her lean back on the headboard and said, "Relax, Sati, you are home and safe, we made it back thanks to you." Sati, caught between the fragments of her memories and the tangible reassurance of Asher's presence, found herself adrift in disbelief. "Be because of me?" "Yes, I am also as confused as you. This is what happened." Asher ventured into the recounting while feeling that Sati really had no idea what happened, just like he suspected. As he spoke, the contours of reality shifted, painting a picture so surreal it threatened the boundaries of belief. Sati listened, her expression an image of evolving emotions. Disbelief and shock chased across her features, leaving trails of confusion as Asher's tale unfolded. The revelation of someone named Luna's existence within her and her relation with the Moon Guardian seemed to defy the very laws of nature that govern their world and everything she believed. Sati's musings, a mixture of gratitude and confusion, echoed the complexity of their situation. So she kept us safe all this time? How could she exist? Why is she hiding inside my body? Asher's next action, born of a blend of desperation and hope, was as unexpected as it was earnest. "Let me try something, even if it might be dumb." Sati blinked while his gaze, intense and focused, locked with hers as he ventured into the unknown. "Luna, if you are there inside, can you come out and at least explain what the hell is going on and who you really are? We appreciate that you saved our asses, but we also deserve an explanation, at least." Sati does. The room, charged with the tension of anticipation, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a sign, a whisper from the mysterious woman. Yet, it was Sati's response, tinged with embarrassment and a hint of pique, that shattered the moment's gravity. "Don't do that. It feels weird to see you calling out some other woman's name while looking at me," she said, her lips pursed, and her gaze averted. Asher chuckled upon feeling that Sati was so easily jealous and said, "You know it's not like that. I am trying to help you out here as well. I also feel a bit uneasy to know that some other woman is living within you since I don't know how it works. I don't want anything bad happening to you, nor do I want you to get hurt by getting involved with the Moon Guardian and all." He seemed to want something from Luna, but I am not sure. Sati's eyes softened as she slowly looked up at him, her lips forming a warm smile, feeling moved by his concern. "HMPH. I won't let anyone mess with me or my family or the people I love. I endured everything for so long, and I am not going to sit back and let myself get hurt, even if it's the Moon Guardian." Asher nodded with a smile when Sati's eyes suddenly widened as she mumbled, "Wait, a broken bar. I remember it, our broken bar. I remember seeing something strange about you in my dreams." Asher's expression became puzzled yet uneasy as he asked, "What is it? What did she remember?" Please vote using golden tickets and power stones. If you guys are enjoying and want to support the novel, join my Discord channel https://discord.gg/hjwkd4nb3z resurgence uengha diaresis copyright car section ang*degrees aita superscript o inverted exclamation mark o. "What is it?" Asher asked, his furrowed brows mirroring the weight of his question. Sati, her gaze distant as if peering into the mists of her own recollections, responded with a hesitance born of uncertainty. "After and before you woke up from your soulless state, I had strange dreams. Most of which I can't remember now. A broken bar." Her voice trailed off, a whisper in the solemn air, but there were details. "Vivid and terrifying. You, in your Hellbringer form, atop a pile of broken and charred skeletons, surrounded by death and destruction. It felt terrifying, a broken bar, as if I was standing in Tartarus," she confessed, the remnants of fear still clinging to the edges of her words, and then added with a guilty look, "That is why I was wary of you. I thought it would be better if you didn't get close to the Queen. Your unknown origins only made me think worse." Asher's reaction was immediate, his surprise evident. "Is this why you went the extra mile to show such animosity to me?" Why didn't you tell me this before? Memories of Sati's wary glances and guarded demeanor flashed through his mind, pieces of a puzzle falling into place. The notion that these dreams might have been glimpses of the future seen by Luna unsettled him, a disquieting thought that filled his mind. Sati averted her gaze as she said with an apologetic look, I didn't want to unnerve you or make you think that I am a weird woman who had all these strange dreams about you. I know it's just stupid dreams but I didn't like thinking or talking about it. I just felt glad that I don't remember most of them. Asha felt it now made even more sense why Sati was really so guarded against him before. These dreams must have unconsciously made her feel distrustful towards him. He felt his heart briefly pound against her chest, wondering if she saw anything that could compromise him or if she might see anything in the future. Seeking to distract himself before Sati notices anything, Asha jested, I had no idea you saw nightmares involving me. I feel hurt. Sati, caught between embarrassment and the remnants of her earlier fears, managed a response, her cheeks blossoming with a flush. This was long ago, once I, came to appreciate that you are not really that much of a bad guy. I stopped caring about these dreams, nor did I have any recently, she admitted. Asha felt relieved to hear that and wondered if his relationship with Sati had anything to do with it. Seizing the opportunity to further dispel the remnants of tension between them, Asha leaned in, his presence an undeniable force. Not that much of a bad guy, huh? His charming smirk and proximity made Sati react, resulting in embarrassment manifesting as the warmth that colored her cheeks. I mean, yes, you are bad but not too bad, she stammered, trying to regain her composure. Asha's mischievous smirk only intensified. So I am bad enough to do this? Without warning, he closed the gap between them, capturing her lips in a heated kiss. Tilda surprised, her eyes widened, but the longer the kiss lasted, the more her defenses crumbled. His taste, his touch had it all felt so intoxicating enough to flush away her embarrassment and not push him away. She found herself reciprocating, craving more as his hot tongue slipped between her lips, exploring her mouth while making her feel giddy. Asha was as bad as she expected, and before she knew it, his hands found their way to her generous assets, squeezing her breasts through the white fabric of her tunic. A muffled moan escaped her lips, her body shivering under his insistent touch, her toes curled in pleasure, the sensations sending shockwaves throughout her body. Reluctantly, Sati pulled away, her face redder than a ripened tomato. Stop. You cannot bully me when I'm sick, she panted, her voice breathless. She placed a trembling hand on his chest, both pushing him away and pulling him closer at the same time. The tug-of-war between her indignation and desire was etched on her flushed countenance. Asha grinned, only a flicker of desire and amusement. Sick? Even if I believed that a healthy woman like you is feeling sick, you're not the only one who's sick here, he teased, his voice dripping with innuendo as he leaned in closer, his words warm against her ear. But I'm willing to power through it, Asha finished with a smirk. For you, of course. What about you? He added with a wink. His hand had gently brushed a stray strand of her red hair from her face, the motion sending shivers down her spine. Igrid, ever humble in his service, responded with a gracious smile, his hands raised in a polite refusal of thanks. Please don't thank me, Your Majesty. This old one was just doing his duty, he demurred, then turned his attention to Consort Isola. Consort Isola just arrived, waiting to check on the battlemaster. Since it seems my work is done here, I shall take my leave, he announced, offering a final bow before making his departure, leaving Asha and Isola in a brief bubble of privacy. So she is really fine? Isola inquired, her concern for Sati apparent in her furrowed brow as she reached out to clasp Asha's hands. Asha's response was gentle, his touch reassuring as he held her hands. Of course, she is, but I do want you to see if she is really okay mentally. Only you can make sure of that. I feel that this Luna woman is not an enemy to us, but we don't really know her, and we don't know how her presence could affect Sati, so I am just worried for Sati. His eyes then filled with a complicated light as he added, I am also worried about ... Isola's gaze softened, her grip tightening in a silent vow of support. Don't worry, husband, I will see to it that city is fine on that end, but you have worried about everyone enough. Now, it's time for you to take a deep breath and relax for a while. You deserve it after everything you went through in that tower. I wish I could have been there for you, she confessed, the regret in her voice underscored by the weight of her words. Asher, his heart touched by her concern, brought her hands to his lips in a tender kiss. Don't feel sad about it. Look at the bright side. I came back stronger because of it. You also became strong because of what you went through. Sometimes, we have to suffer through trials and tribulations to become better, he mused, echoing the words Dracarys had told him. Isola's smile, tinged with affection and amusement, lightened the mood. It seems like you have grown wiser as well, she teased, chuckling softly. Asher agreed, absolutely. Speaking of growth, I believe certain aspects of mine may require your attention sooner rather than later. He trailed off suggestively, raising an eyebrow as he shot Isola a knowing glance. I can let you find out later in your room, he quipped, his wink eliciting a blush from Isola, her cheeks warming with the flush of anticipation and embarrassment. Your teasing can wait until I am done taking care of City, Isola managed, her voice a mix of playful sternness and affection. Very well. Even though patience is not one of my virtues, I shall put up with it for City's sake. Asher acquiesced with a smile before planting a brief kiss on her soft blue lips and exchanging a warm glance before the two walked away in opposite directions. However, as he walked away, Asher had this lingering desire to bask in the warmth of his women at the same time, but the question was a broken bar. Will they agree to it, especially Rowena? He could already imagine how each of them would react, though if his wish came true, it would truly be the most beautiful and heartwarming thing to ever happen to him. However, for now, he knew these dreams would have to wait as he had a lot on his plate to deal with. Is he dreaming too much? Please vote using golden tickets and power stones. If you guys are enjoying and want to support the novel, join my Discord channel https://discord.gg/hjwkd4nb3z resurgence uengha diaresis copyright car section ang*degrees aita superscript o inverted exclamation mark o. In the chilling embrace of Dreadthorn Castle, a figure glided through a desolate hall, her seductive dark blue gown clinging to her slender frame, accentuating her every sinuous movement. Her eyes, a haunting shade of ghostly red, sparkled with an impish delight while her mischievous smile twisted the corners of her full, blood-red lips upwards. Long silver hair danced behind her, seeming to have a life of its own in the cold drafts that traveled through the halls devoid of servants or maids. Strangely, not a single soul stirred in this corridor of the castle. Upon reaching her destination, the room at the corridor's end, a bottle of crimson liquid appeared in her hand as if conjured by thought alone. With a flick of the wrist, the dark blue door swung open, revealing the room's occupant in a scene untouched by time. The bottle of blood glinted ominously in the crimson light that streamed through the dusty, cobweb-ridden windows. "Little brother, are you awake?" she whispered, her voice as sweet as honey laced with venom, as she sauntered into the room that seemingly should have been off-limits to anyone but her. The musty, oppressive air inside the chamber could choke any ordinary person, making her wrinkle her nose, though her lips curved upon seeing a young man sleeping on the bed, enshrouded in blankets, his back to her, a figure of isolation amidst the gloom. A sly chuckle escaped her lips as she dragged a chair with a screeching noise that seemed to echo throughout the room, enough to even wake a sleeping beast. Sabina seated herself, her voice a seemingly gentle chide. "Don't you get bored of sleeping, brother? Your room reeks of blood and sweat after you ordered all your servants to not even step foot in this corridor. How do you even sleep while breathing the stinky air inside here?" Edmund, however, remained unmoved, a statue in the guise of slumber, with a mischievous glint in her eye. Sabina resorted to more direct measures, her foot connecting with his ass in a swift motion. "Wakey wakey, argh." Edmund's reaction was instantaneous, a howl of surprise and pain marking his violent awakening. "Sabina, what the F?" His curse was abruptly halted as awareness dawned, the familiarity of his sister's presence tempering his initial outburst. "Why can't you just let me sleep in peace?" His voice, though tinged with irritation, was subdued as he slowly turned around with a bitter expression, though his gaze was lowered as if unable to meet her eyes. "Sigh, you poor thing." Sabina clicked her tongue as if in pity with a shake of her head upon seeing the disheveled mess before her. His silver hair was a tangled mat upon his pale forehead, and stubble dotted his once chiseled jawline. Leaning in, Sabina dangled the blood-filled bottle before his nose, reveling in the coppery scent that filled the space between them. "Famished, brother?" She chuckled, her smile widening wickedly. "Aren't you feeling thirsty after sleeping for so long?" "I was feeling worried, so don't get so mad, foo-foo." Grasping the bottle with hands that trembled not from the chill of the room but from the turmoil within, Edmund drank deeply, the rich, metallic liquid a meager balm for wounds far deeper than flesh. His expression went from a scowl to a softened, slightly more rejuvenated look. "Thank you, sister. You are the only one who has been kind to me ever since I returned from that fucking quest, and I lost my—" His voice broke, the words too heavy, too laden with loss to pass his lips. The pain of losing more than just his woman's virginity still felt fresh as he added, "Nobody else cares about me, not even our mother." He spat out, jaw clenched in rage. "SHH." Sabina placed a finger against her lips as she soothed. "You can't be more wrong. Did you not know that our mother is planning to get your little thing back from that pretty vicious alien who took it from you?" Hope, fragile and flickering, ignited within Edmund's gaze at her words. "Ah, really?" But the spark was quickly clouded by doubt, by the fear of irreparable loss. What if that fucking alien threw it away? "He must have, since he wanted to destroy me in every way. I can't even." The words trailed off into a shiver of fear, rage, and pain, a storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. He felt his nerves quivering with uncontrollable emotions as he once again remembered everything he lost and the things he could no longer do. He couldn't even bring himself to look at a beauty or any woman. He didn't even want to let anyone know what happened to him and ordered every servant not to step onto his floor. The days of enjoying his time with so many beauties were just memories now, something that was impossible for him to enjoy anymore. He couldn't even jerk off while thinking about his fiancée, who was sitting just a foot away from him now. Even if his father didn't ground him, he would have still chosen to lock himself away in his castle rather than go out and mortify himself. He couldn't even bear to look at Sabina's seductive figure, lest he gets reminded of what he lost in reawakening desires that would only torture his mind. The shame of having seen her lose her virginity to his worst enemy was yet another fact that was killing him from within. Sabina's smile, however, was a sign of hope in the tempest of his despair. "Don't you worry, brother. We just got a letter from our pretty king, which hints that he still has your thing preserved. Of course, it's obvious he wants to negotiate, so our mother has gone to take care of it. Who knows? You will become a man again in no time." Edmund found a flicker of hope in Sabina's revelation. "He really has it?" The words slipped from his lips, a mixture of disbelief and burgeoning hope. The possibility of reclaiming a part of himself thought forever lost lit a faint spark in the gloom of his despair. He was relieved since as long as it was there, it could be reattached to his body. Yet, doubt quickly clouded his newfound hope. "But what does he want in return? I don't think it can be anything good. What if he demands that I become his slave or something? I know he wants me dead or worse." The fear in Edmund's voice was palpable, a mirror to the scars left by what happened during that quest, scars that ran deeper than flesh. His expression contorted in terror as he mumbled, Please sister, you have to protect me from him." "Okay, mother might agree for the sake of our house, but I. He stammered, desperation and terror lingering in his voice. Sabina's response was both teasing and probing. "What? Even if he asks that, do you not want your precious little Edmund back?" Her question, delivered with a playful flutter of eyelashes, belied the gravity of the situation. Her words hit home as Edmund's response was a tempest of emotion. "Of course I do," he roared, the turmoil within him breaking free for a moment before he regained his composure. But to become his slave. It would be worse than death. So is losing your little Edmund forever, Sabina said with a shrug, making Edmund grit his teeth, as he felt like he was stuck standing on a small piece of flimsy rock with two rivers of lava on either side. But since you are my little brother, I will pay him a few visits and see if I can change his mind. You know how I can be quite convincing, right? Sabina smirked while her promise rekindled a sliver of hope within Edmund's beleaguered heart. Her assurance was a lifeline, thrown across the dark waters of his despair. Edmund's gratitude was immediate, a balm to the sting of his fears. Thank you, sister. But the hesitation that followed, a pause filled with sudden trepidation, spoke volumes of his lingering doubts. Or maybe. You shouldn't. It might not be a good idea now that he just continues to become more powerful. He remembered how that fucking alien violated his sister before him, torturing her before taking her virginity. He still couldn't shake off the images of the faces she made nor forget the sounds that escaped her lips each time that alien thrust his monstrous thing into her slender body. The first few times he remembered it, he literally coughed out blood, and even now, his blood was thrashing within him when he remembered it. Sabina's scoff was a brushstroke of defiance and contempt. What powerful. In the end, he is still a junior and I won't let him walk all over us. As long as my last name is Thorn, I won't let anybody who crossed me or our house get away with it. Just you wait. I am going to make him suffer a lot under my hands until he begs me for death. Her declaration, fierce and bloodthirsty, made Edmund smile, touched by his sister's determination. I don't know what I would do without you, sister. I will then wait until you succeed. You can take your time. Sabina nodded as her blood-red lips curved upwards, her eyes briefly glowing with a frenzied light in anticipation of what awaited her. In the heart of the Whispering Cove, the charmingly imposing building located in the mist-veiled Mistshore village, Asher lazily sprawled on a plush, crimson chaise lounge in his private chamber. This chamber was just one of a dozen of the Whispering Cove. This haven, originally constructed as a meeting place for his vassals, had evolved into a personal retreat, a space where the cacophony of the outside world was held at bay, allowing for moments of introspection and privacy for Asher. Cookus, with an enthusiasm bubbling forth over his face, was attending to Asher with a mix of overwhelming reverence and excitement. Boss, is it really true that my sister is the granddaughter of the Moon Guardian? Won't that mean I am his grandson? Maybe there is a peak soul devourer inside me too, like an alpha Cookus. What do you think, boss? His voice, ripe with hope and naivety, filled the chamber, though inwardly he was dreaming of sitting on the throne of the Moon Guardian as the next hidden successor with a couple of beauties from all races at his side. He grinned as he thought that beauties would be waiting in long queues to obtain his favor. Asher planted his hand against his forehead, exasperation etched into the lines on his forehead as he shot Cookus a mock-weary look. I highly doubt even a leech would want to live inside you. Stop dreaming and get out of here. I have work to do, he snapped, and planted a kick on his face. Cookus's departure, marked by a squeaky howl as he rolled out of the door, left Asher alone with his thoughts. Asher came to know that Sati told them about what happened to Marina and Cookus. He couldn't understand why she would tell such things to her big-mouthed idiot of a brother, but he could see that she loved her family more than anything. But at the same time, he also learned that Marina also had no idea and was equally shocked about Luna and who she really was. He then decided to make sure he was prepared to receive his guest. Esther Thorne. He was pretty sure she would come after receiving his letter. After all, by holding the future of their house hostage, they can't risk flexing their strength at him. Otherwise, someone like Esther would never make themselves seem small by coming to him. He retrieved a small jar from his cupboard, its contents a dark, oily liquid that concealed a severed small body part, a shriveled cock, floating within the jar. He let out a subtle scoff as he placed it on the table. He had made careful preparations to preserve it to use it as an ace card against the thrones. Still, he had to thank Sabina for making the whole thing as easy and smooth as possible. He never thought he would have an ally like her within their house. Thinking about it, That crazy woman deserves to be tortured more in his hands after everything she tried to do. He began to think of plans on how to torture her until she passed out, but suddenly, his brows raised, and he closed his eyes to sense the person who came outside, giving him a slight surprise to see that it wasn't Esther. A subtle cold curve touched his lips. "Oh, looks like your patience is running thin," he murmured as he slowly opened his eyes. Meanwhile, on the outside, the Umberalfian guards stood their ground, their loyalty forged in the fires of respect and admiration for the king's deeds and his love for their princess. Tales of the king's valor and his benevolence towards their people had elevated him to a revered status among them, taking oaths to protect him despite the complicated history they shared. But right before she could say anything, Eradicator's gaze shifted briefly before she looked back at her and said, "His Majesty has sensed your arrival. He is willing to see you. You may go inside now." Saying so, Eradicator stepped aside without even looking at Rebecca. Rebecca harumphed as she walked past Eradicator and the guards with loud, sharp steps before disappearing into the building. As Rebecca stepped into the hall, her gaze swept the room, sharp and assessing, reflecting her surprise at the absence of servants. Not even a single soul was present in this building other than him, but she felt this was better since she could be herself before Asher instead of trying to maintain decorum. However, the moment Asher made his entrance, the air between them crackled with tension, her gaze locking onto him with an intensity that could curdle blood. "You know why I came here, so let's not waste any time and tell me what you can do about it," she stated, bitterness lacing her words. Asher's response, a laugh tinged with disbelief and a hint of scorn, echoed in the hall. "Is that the way you ask for help from someone whom you owe a lot, from someone who has the only chance of saving your son?" he countered, stepping towards her with a confidence that seemed to fill the room. Rebecca, unyielding, retorted with a mix of indignation and anger, "Oh, I believe whatever quarrels you had with Oberon were settled the moment you sent him into a coma for 3 years, but I am not telling you to bring back Oberon for me. You have to do it for the sake of our kingdom. He is still a respected prince of this kingdom. It won't do you any good if he is being imprisoned any longer or if anything happens to him." Asher, closing the distance between them, wore a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Really? I am sorry, but I have no reason to care about saving face as the king when I reveal to everyone what your dear son did during our journey." Rebecca's confusion was palpable, her furrowed brows as a growing unease took root in her. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, a mix of tension and confusion in her voice. Asher's demeanor suddenly turned icy, his words sharp as a blade. "Your son betrayed his king by leaving him to die more than once. He abandoned his people when they needed him the most and only cared about saving his own skin. So what do you think our people would want me to do once they learn about your son's loyalty? Obviously, there are a number of witnesses who saw it. They are only remaining silent because I am silent. So far, the revelation hit Rebecca like a physical blow, her wide eyes reflecting a turmoil of emotions. What could have driven her son to such extremes? She knew even if Oberon hated Asher with every inch of his being, he would never do anything to compromise himself. Otherwise, he would have tried to assassinate Asher so many times. But for him to go this far and make himself like a traitor before everyone else made her wonder what Asher did to him during the journey. For Oberon to act like this. Asher, observing her reaction with a measure of satisfaction, leaned in, his voice low and compelling as he looked down at her. "So before you make any demands, you are going to listen to mine if you want to have a chance of getting your son back. You must have done something to him. My Oberon would never become a traitor. What did you do to my son? You let him get taken by the Draconians, didn't you?" Rebecca's accusation, sharp and filled with the protective ferocity of a mother, cut through the silence. She refused to give in to his demands when he was the reason her son was suffering. Asher, unmoved by her vehemence, met her gaze with a cool detachment that belied the storm brewing beneath. His scoff was a gust of wind that fanned the flames of her indignation, yet his voice, when it came, was the ice that sought to douse them. "You said my quarrel with him was settled after I supposedly put him in a coma for 3 years. Even if that were true, Do you really think it would make up for the fact that he tortured me while I was just a helpless boy for more than 10 years? You think I would let him off easy after all that? Veins popped over Rebecca's temples as he indirectly revealed that he was the one who made Oberon get imprisoned. You won't. Before Rebecca could lash out, Asher interrupted with a cold smile. Forget that. Do you want to keep throwing accusations, or do you want to save your son? Who knows, every second you waste, your son might be getting tortured. You must know how the Draconians torture their prisoners, right? The gravity of his words struck Rebecca, quenching the fire of her anger and replacing it with a chilling dread. Taking a deep, sharp breath, she steadied herself, the severity of the situation rendering her next words almost a whisper. What will it take for you to rescue him? Can you even do it? Asher's lips curved in a sardonic smile, basking himself in the power he wielded at this moment. I can guarantee you that I am the only one who can return Oberon back to you. As for what I want, I want you to become my slave. I want you to willingly bear that mark of shame and loyalty to me. The audacity of his demand sent shockwaves through Rebecca, her outrage manifesting in the widening of her eyes and the sharp intake of breath. How dare you? Did you just ask me to become your slave? Have you lost your mind and forgotten who you are talking to? I am your senior in every way. You don't get to disrespect me like this. Broken by yet. Asher's laughter, brief and devoid of warmth, preluded a chilling shift in his demeanor. His gaze, now cold and contemptuous, bore into her, a mirror reflecting the fire raging within him. I know I am talking to the woman who allowed her son to torture me and even encouraged him to make my life a living hell for years, so, I should be the one asking. Did you forget who you are talking to? He took a step forward, his face only mere inches away from hers as he towered over her and looked down at her. I am your king whether you like it or not. You are beneath me in every way. Even a slave in the street has more value than you in my eyes. Broken by her voice faltered, the weight of his words like chains binding her, rendering her speechless as his figure cast a large shadow over hers. Asher, seizing the moment of her vulnerability, delivered his ultimatum with a cold, unyielding smile. Your silence has answered for you, so what is it going to be? Are you going to hold on to your fragile pride or save your son? It's up to you. The stalemate between the two reached its peak. Rebecca, her dignity affronted, realized Asher wouldn't budge from his atrocious demands. The very notion of subservience to this bastard, a brat she viewed through a window of contempt and anger, was outrageous to her. Her pride, a towering edifice built upon her noble lineage and the respect accorded to her house, bristled at the thought of being reduced to servitude under him. She couldn't imagine becoming a slave to this alien scum who was also her junior. How could she reduce herself to such a pathetic state and let him walk all over her? Even if she becomes his slave, he might not keep his word and will instead try to humiliate and destroy her thoroughly while her son would still be imprisoned. And so, her emotions boiled over. Over my dead body, you bastard, she spat, the venom in her words echoing her defiance. With a turn sharp enough to slice through the tension in the air, she departed, leaving behind a silence that spoke volumes. Asher, however, remained unfazed as he curved his lips. I knew you would say that, but let's see how long you can keep up that attitude, he mumbled to himself, his confidence unshaken. To him, this was but another move on the chessboard, a step towards an endgame he had already envisaged. Reaching for his whispering stone, he whispered into it, I want to send a message to hear. A broken bar. An hour passed, and the tranquil facade of the Whispering Cove was once again disturbed by the arrival of a figure that commanded attention without uttering a single word. Esther Thorne, with her regal bearing and silver hair that flowed like a river under the moonlight, descended gracefully toward the entrance, the lower end of her off-shoulder dark blue gown billowing under the wind. Her face was inexpressive, without the slightest emotion in her pale red eyes. The people standing around couldn't help but wonder why such powerful senior figures of the Bloodburn Kingdom were personally coming here to visit their king. They could understand why the princess consort came here, but what did the lady of House Thorne urgently want from the Bloodburn King to come here personally? Esther silently began to walk towards the entrance of the Whispering Cove while the guards gave way. Her entrance, unheralded yet charged with an air of expectancy, found herself in this void of presence. Not even a servant was present to greet her. Not that she cared. The silence was broken by Asher's voice, a disembodied call that seemed both an invitation and a challenge. "Please come up, Lady Esther, I have been waiting for you." Esther narrowed her eyes and began to walk towards the stairs, ascending the staircase, guided by the echo of Asher's voice. Esther navigated the corridors with a grace that belied the urgency of the matter she came here for. The open doors beckoned her into a room where casual opulence met indifference. Asher, ensconced in his sofa, exuded a nonchalance that bordered on provocation, sipping from his chalice with a leisure that contrasted sharply with the urgency of her mission. "Please come in, you can treat my chambers as your own since you are my guest." Asher's invitation, delivered without rising, was laced with a subtle insolence that did not escape Esther. The gesture, dismissive and familiar, grated against the protocols of respect and decorum that governed their interactions. Yet, for Esther, the stakes were too high to quibble over etiquette. Her purpose here transcended personal affronts, driving her into his den with a single-minded resolve. Asher gestured towards the chair in front of him. "Why don't you take a seat? I would hate to make you stand." Ignoring the offered chair, she remained standing, an embodiment of her refusal to concede any ground. "I am comfortable where I am, now. Do you have it?" Her voice was an indifferent blade, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Asher's response was a smile that both acknowledged the gravity of her request and belied the complexity of the negotiation to come. With a casual flick of his wrist, a jar materialized in his hand, a severed and shriveled penis floating in a thick dark yellow liquid. "This is what you want, right?" Esther's reaction, a momentary tremor in her otherwise impassive demeanor, betrayed the importance of the jar's contents. Yet, she quickly regained her composure, her gaze returning to Asher with a calculated coolness. "State your price," she demanded. Asher raised one of his brows upon seeing how she didn't even try to put up any airs or make a show but instead wanted to deal with the heart of the matter straight away. She wasn't even showing an ounce of anger at him for making her lose face by coming here or, most of all, cutting off her eldest son's future. Rebecca was like a raging storm while her sister was an icy pool that had no ripples at all. He got up and began to walk towards her. "It's quite interesting, two sisters but so different from each other. What opinion do you have of your sister? I have rarely seen you two interact, at least before me." Esther, inexpressive yet focused, knew Rebecca had come here recently to talk to him. However, she had no plans to entertain him. "I'm not here to talk about my sister. Do you or do you not want anything in return for the jar?" she retorted, her voice a calm sea above untold depths. Asher's sigh, laden with a feigned disappointment, filled the space between them. "Sigh, I was only trying to make conversation, but it seems like I am boring you," he remarked, his tone light yet probing, testing the waters of Esther's patience and resolve. Esther, ever the stoic, stood her ground, her gaze turning jaded under the weight of Asher's words. She recognized the power play for what it was, a junior, as she deemed him, savoring the leverage he wielded over her esteemed house, and so she decided to let him have his moment if it would make things progress quicker. "All right then," Asher conceded with a nonchalant shrug, his approach deliberate as he closed the distance between them. He leaned in, towering over her as he looked downwards, his voice low with a sardonic smile twisting his lips. "But you must know what I want, right?" Esther's demeanor betrayed no emotion as she met his gaze, her eyes as indifferent as the void itself. She cut short their staring contest by breaking the tense silence. "Very well." The simple words seemed weighted with a chilling yet hidden emotion. In one fluid motion, she began to unzip the back of her dark blue gown, its azure hues cascading to the floor like a waterfall in reverse. She stood before him in her dark blue underwear, half naked and unashamed, a marble statue come to life. Asher's eyes widened, betraying a flicker of surprise as Esther's voice, as cool and detached as winter air, sliced through the thick ambience. "Before you begin, "There is something you have to follow through," she said with a hollowness that chilled bone and soul alike. Asher felt stumped momentarily as he wasn't expecting her to suddenly undress herself before him, especially the lady of House Thorn. She didn't even blink, nor did she even show an ounce of shame of doing this before him. He asked her because he thought she would know that he wanted something precious from her house and wasn't expecting her to offer herself. But now that she suddenly revealed her half-naked body to him, he couldn't help but take a good look. Her beauty was nothing short of enthralling, her icy aura matching her elegant appearance. Her face was an image of pristine features, with high cheekbones that lent her an air of regal aloofness. Her pale red eyes, a shade reminiscent of the deepest rubies, stared at him, their unblinking gaze devoid of any emotional warmth. Her skin, a flawless porcelain surface, appeared to be kissed by the moonlight itself, and her silver hair was a cascade of frosty silk that cascaded down her slender neck and across her exposed shoulders. Her figure was slender yet curved in all the right places, a figure reminiscent of a marble goddess come to life. Her posture, even when partially undressed, exuded a confident poise that betrayed neither shyness nor vanity. Her medium-sized bosom was but an accentuation of her slim hips and narrow waist. The dark blue panties she wore only served to accentuate her smooth, pale skin, leaving little to the imagination of what was hidden beneath. Despite her aloof demeanor, there was an undeniable sensuality now that she exposed herself like this before him. Her very indifference and coldness only served to heighten her allure, transforming her into an unattainable woman that piqued his interest sexually, challenging him to thaw this frosty beauty. But Asher came back to his senses as he wondered if this was a trap. No, that couldn't be possible unless she was willing to destroy herself as well. She must be really serious if she thought he was about to ask her to offer her body. Still, was she really willing to do this with the man who cut off her son's future? Did Thorin give her the pass, or did she decide on her own? He can't believe how she and Rebecca were sisters when they seemed so different. Esther kept looking into his eyes, trying to discern his thoughts, and felt confused upon seeing the hint of uncertainty and surprise in his eyes. She thought a young and powerful man like him, who had quite the reputation of being interested in women, especially powerful and high-ranked ones, must have held desires to have a taste of her as well. It was the same for every man with great power and status. Did she make a wrong assumption? If this isn't what you want, a broken bar. Esther waved her hand as tendrils of blood seeped out of her skin and began to pull up the dress pooled around her feet to dress herself. Esther furrowed her brows upon hearing his crude rules, though she remained unfazed and wasn't surprised. Asher sighed and added, "But since you're going so far for your son, I am willing to offer you a chance to get your son's future back, even if you fail, but only if you make me fail to make you orgasm 3 times. Asher felt that this way, he could make Esther keep coming to him and let him have the chance to break her gradually. Even if he had a deal with Sabina, it wouldn't be enough since she was still only the young lady of their house. But Esther ... Once he can maintain a hold over her, it would be so easy to manage his kingdom without looking behind his back. If he could make Neda climax, he was confident he could make this frosty beauty come for him as well. Esther slowly nodded and said in a detached voice, "I agree to these rules, and you shall have a week to fulfill the terms." Asher raised his brows briefly. He'd initially expected more resistance from this aloof woman, but it seemed desperation was a great motivator. With a precision that spoke of her mastery over her own powers, Esther unfurled the scroll, her finger moving with an elegance and speed that seemed to blur the lines between magic and artistry. The words she inscribed onto the parchment were more than mere text but a powerful pact. Ash knew she was using a blood oath contract, one of the most powerful forms of contract that was said to be unbreakable even by experts. There was no way out of the contract without fulfilling the terms. As expected, someone like her came prepared with the best tools. Not that he was worried. Upon completing the inscription, she pressed her finger against the scroll's surface, her blood sealing the agreement. "I have listed all the rules you have stated. It's your turn to sign it. The one who breaks this contract would serve the other as their slave," she declared, her icy gaze meeting Asher's. Asher, taking a moment to scrutinize the contract, carefully read everything just to make sure. Since he was dealing with an enemy, he wondered if she might sneak in some clauses favorable to her, but to his surprise or not, she listed everything exactly as he said. With a decisive motion, he bit down on his finger and pressed it against the scroll. "I agree as well," he affirmed. The instant his blood mingled with the ink of the contract, Asher experienced an unexpected sensation, a chilling energy that coursed through him, binding him to the agreement in a way that was both ethereal and irrevocable. It was a sensation that made him realize that the contract was bound to his blood, but he inwardly smirked, knowing that she had no idea that all it would take was for him to transform into his Hellbringer form once, and this contract would no longer have any strings attached to his body. The moment the contract dissolved into nothingness, sealing the dark pact between Asher and Esther, the latter sauntered past him in a leisurely manner. With a graceful yet careless motion, she plopped down on the edge of the bed, the mattress barely creaking under her weight. In a bored, nonchalant tone, she asked, "What are you waiting for?" Asher couldn't stand her detached demeanor any longer. With newfound determination, he decided that he would shatter her icy facade. He would make her feel what it meant to be a woman who would lust for his cock, to feel desire, to crave, and to weep with pleasure. Confident in his abilities, he swiftly pinned her down on the plush mattress and hastily rid her of her panties, revealing the pristine beauty of her mature pink slit adorned with a silver hedge of pubic hair. "Can you make it quick?" she asked, her voice as frosty as before, as if she were merely waiting for an inconvenient errand to be over. Asher looked at her, astonished by her nonchalance. He had expected a gasp of surprise, perhaps a blush, or at least some show of emotion, but her cold demeanor fueled him to further prove himself and have her moaning in ecstasy in no time. He freed his hard member from his trousers, and Esther's eyes flicked downwards, only for a moment. The barest flicker of surprise flickered in her pale red irises. She could now see why all these women were surrounding him, though the next moment, her expression reverted to a disinterested state. But just as Asher positioned his cock near her pussy, Esther warned with a distant gaze, "Remember ... you only have 10 minutes. "Oh, I'm well aware of our little deal." He smirked, a taunting glint in his gaze, "But I won't need that long to make you come for me." Asher positioned himself at her entrance, her frigid folds a sharp contrast to his raging hardness. He had never met such a chillingly distant woman, and the challenge only spurred him on. He slowly eased himself within her tight sheath, her icy walls making him shudder. A slight wince crossed Asher's features when their bodies connected. Her insides felt frigid against his heated skin, yet, regardless of her being a mother of 3, her pussy walls remained surprisingly snug around him. Esther briefly furrowed her brows, but the next moment, they became expressionless even as he kept pushing his thick cock into her pussy while spreading her legs with his hands. Asher began to move his hips, pummeling his cock in and out of Esther's pussy, but she continued to stare at him expressionlessly with no hint of any emotion or even a blush on her cheeks. It was as if she wasn't really feeling anything, and this baffled Asher since he had never seen any woman like this, not reacting to his cock. But with Esther, it was as if he was simply fucking a lifeless mannequin. Does having a cold bloodline and practicing death arts turn a person into something akin to a corpse? She didn't even feel an ounce of sensation from his cock. Just what kind of a monster was she? How did Thorin even manage to make kids with someone like her? Or were the two similar enough to make it happen? He wouldn't be surprised if that were true. This made him wonder how Sabina and Rebecca turned out so different from Esther, at least on the outside. Sabina's pussy was cold, but he was able to warm her up in no time. He felt more humiliated than losing against the Moon Guardian. At least that was an unfair fight in many ways, and he knew what he lacked. But in his situation with Esther, he had no idea what he was lacking. His demonic sword was more powerful than any other man's, and even Nada said it. "That's it, our broken bar." Asher's eyes suddenly lit up as an idea struck him. He should go and ask Nada about this, even if it was embarrassing for him. Only someone like her would know how to deal with Esther. She always had answers whenever he met a dead end. But he can't call her here, and he needs to find some excuse to visit her castle lest Vernon suspects anything. This made him realize he should also ask Nada if there was any secret place where they could meet together to avoid any problems. He couldn't believe he was forced to think like this, but now there was no other choice. Amidst the verdant splendor of the Bloodvian castle's gardens, where the air was fragrant with the scent of blooming flowers, Asher and Nada strolled leisurely, their hands occasionally brushing as they tended to the flora. "I knew you might come to me for help with this." Nada's voice, light and melodious, broke the tranquil silence, her words carrying a hint of amusement. Her soft chuckle prompted Asher to clear his throat, a slight awkwardness in his stance as he once again remembered what happened with Esther. "So you already knew how things might unfold when you told me that House Thorn has what I needed?" Asher inquired, his curiosity piqued by her foresight. With a gentle smile that seemed to soften her already delicate features, Nada replied, "I wasn't sure, but since I got to know you more, I had a guess. But even if I told you, you still would have gone ahead and tried to see if you could deal with Esther on your own." Asher, taken aback by her accurate read of his nature despite getting to know each other only recently, let out a chuckle, a sound that mingled with the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. "You seem to know me well already, but yeah, I suppose I would have realized things the hard way no matter what you said." Turning to Nada with a look of genuine inquiry, Asher sought to understand something better. "But you didn't tell me why Esther is like that." "I haven't come upon a woman like her. How could it be possible for a woman to not feel anything after all that? What should I do to defeat her?" Nada's smile shone with a hint of amusement. "She must have really made an impression on you for you to be this eager to get back at her." Asher cleared his throat as he shrugged and said, "I hate to admit it, but a broken bar it is what it is. I overestimated myself." Nada softly blinked as she said in a comforting tone, "Don't take it to heart. You are still so young, and you have never gone up against an old and shrewd one like her. That is so like Esther. Even when we were young, she always dealt with people in a way that made them feel pathetic or useless. She is so good at putting down people like that until she gets things done her way. Most of the time, she uses her strength, but against you, I suppose she couldn't do that, so she had to resort to something a broken bar, simple but effective." Asher, absorbing every word, felt an uncomfortable truth settle within him. Esther did indeed make him feel just as Nada described, with an efficiency that left him grappling for footing in their interactions. As Nada's hands gracefully moved to caress the petals of a nearby flower, she continued, "And the reason she is able to do that is mainly because of her bloodline and the arts she practices. Most of the thorns are incredibly cold, like ice, to the point they won't let any emotion affect them, especially whenever they make important decisions. They go through rigorous and harsh training to learn how to control and suppress their emotions to the point they can make decisions objectively. This, coupled with the death arts they practice, allow them to completely detach themselves from emotions. Like a corpse that moves and breathes." This revelation shed light on Esther, explaining her seemingly impassive demeanor. His intrigue deepened, prompting further inquiry, "But what about her children and Rebecca? They don't seem like people who are calm and highly objective despite being of the same bloodline." Nada explained with a raise of her brow, "I didn't say all thorns are the same. Only most of them, and sometimes certain members of their bloodline, develop their personalities in different ways depending on how they train. Rebecca used the cold in her blood for precision and control of her powers instead of using it to control her emotions and senses. She also trained herself in the death arts to maximize her combat strength instead of using it to control her mind. In essence, it is like her emotions and senses, like pain and pleasure, have been severed from her mind." Asher pulled together his brows as he felt things were now starting to make sense. Nada added, "That is why she is more powerful than Esther in combat. She was never one to follow the conventional ways. As for Esther's children, their personalities naturally developed despite getting trained by their mother. It's a coincidence that those three aren't like their parents." Asher absorbed the complexity of the Thorn family dynamics, understanding the diverse ways the same bloodline could manifest in its members. He now realized why Rebecca was so different compared to her sister. He also understood why Rebecca was so strong and even went toe-to-toe with Lysandra despite Lysandra holding the elemental advantage over her. If that advantage didn't exist, he felt she might have a slight edge over Lysandra. With a sigh, Asher sought guidance for the looming challenge ahead. Then how am I supposed to deal with her? She stood up, her elegant figure outlined against the sun, turning her attention to Asher with a narrowed gaze. There is only one way, but it could end up costing you a very dear price which you might not be willing to pay. So are you sure you want me to tell you what that way is? Her voice, soft yet firm, carried a warning that intrigued Asher. His interest piqued. Asher's eyes narrowed in determination. I'm not afraid of taking any risks as long as it isn't impossible, but why don't you tell me first before I decide? He responded, his voice laced with the readiness to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He had to somehow conquer Esther to get what he wanted. If he doesn't, his future and that of his kingdom would have less chance of surviving all dangers looming outside the kingdom, and so will his plans for vengeance. Nada's smile was enigmatic as she proposed, why don't you come with me later today to a certain place? I can show you what that method is and let you decide after you see it with your own eyes. It is not really a place where a king like you should visit, so you would have to disguise yourself. Asher agreed, eager to uncover the mystery Nada hinted at. That won't be a problem. I can't wait to see what kind of special method you want to show me, he declared, his resolve shining through. 8 hours later, as Nada prepared to leave her castle, a deep yet elegant voice of a man echoed from behind. Nada, where are you going at this hour? The sun will set soon. I don't remember you mentioning any plans for today. Nada turned to face her husband, Vernon, offering him a smile that belied the depth of her thoughts. I have a small errand to run but nothing noteworthy enough to make me feel like I should let you know, she explained, her voice carrying a hint of mystery. Vernon's expression showed a mix of worry and inquiry. Does it have anything to do with the king's visit here? After your return from the Draconese kingdom, you seem to have earned this favor. I wonder what you did when so many others failed. Her smile, light and carefree, shone through as she said, all I did was make him feel happy with what I could offer him. As they say, keep your king happy, and our people shall bask in prosperity and strength. Isn't that what you want as well? Approaching her slowly, Vernon's concern was palpable. Yes, but I wouldn't want you to push yourself too much and do something that could bring about unpleasant ramifications. You won't do that, right? A broken bar for the sake of the house and our children? Her response to his concern came with a soft chuckle that seemed to dance through the air, light yet carrying an edge. Why would you worry that I would do something like that? She asked, her tone light but her eyes briefly betraying a deeper emotion. Vernon's sigh echoed softly in the vast space, his gaze on Nada filled with a tender concern that seemed almost out of place in the regal setting. I am just worried for you. I wouldn't want you to get hurt in any way, he admitted. Nada's gaze swept the room, taking in the shadows that played across the ancient walls before returning to Vernon with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Don't you think it's a bit too late for that? You already know that nothing can hurt me anymore, so you shouldn't waste time worrying about pointless things. I wouldn't want you to tire yourself like that. You are already exhausted, having taken good care of our house ever since you were a child, so you should just continue what you have been doing for all these years, she said, her voice calm but her smile carrying a subtle sharpness. Vernon's expression flickered as his eyes shone with complicated emotions. Nada, I will be back soon, she assured him with a smile that seemed to promise more than her words could say, interrupting him before he could finish his sentence. Then, with a grace that belied the tension of their conversation, she turned and walked through the large doors of the castle, leaving Vernon alone with his thoughts. As the doors closed behind her, Vernon remained still for a moment longer, his eyes closed as if to shut out the thoughts in his mind. With a heavy sigh, he turned around and walked away. As twilight bled into the crevices of an old town, a carriage, small and weather-beaten, trundled into view. The town itself, shrouded in shadows and an eerie silence, seemed as though it had swallowed the sun, refusing to let any light escape its grasp. The few souls that dared to walk the streets moved like ghosts, their footsteps whispering tales of a darkness that clung to the very air. The carriage halted with a final groan of its wheels before a 7-meter-tall building that seemed to shrink away from the touch of the dim light. Its entrance was guarded by small iron doors, as if the building itself were a creature, wary of intruders. Its iron jaws clamped shut. From the carriage emerged two figures, a man and a woman, cloaked in mystery and the semblance of adventure. Cloaks draped over their forms, concealing their intentions as effectively as the cloth masks hid their expressions. Yet, it was their eyes, dark orange and flickering with an inner fire, that marked them as outcasts, members of a lower-class bloodline, yet undeterred and fierce. What kind of place is this? I had no idea such a place existed just outside our kingdom, the man, Asher, whispered, his voice a blend of curiosity and surprise. Nada gave him a brief glance before her gaze returned to the foreboding iron doors. This is the sunken sky town. A very infamous place to get things that you normally won't get in the usual markets. This town is run by powerful people from different clans and kingdoms, respecting a mutual agreement to protect this town to benefit them all. Only those who have a clear purpose of coming here and capable enough can survive a night here, she whispered back, her voice as soft as the shadowed air around them. As she approached the iron gates, Nada's hand lifted in a gesture that seemed both daring and desperate. She knocked softly, the sound echoing like a challenge in the silent town. Asher, curious, moved to join her, standing a step behind as a small opening in the door revealed a pair of eyes, dark green and assessing. "What business do you have by coming here?" The voice that followed was as menacing as the town itself, a growl from the shadows. Nada's response was calm, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Please tell your boss that the sun would never bleed as long as she is alive." The guard regarded them, the silence stretching before the small opening slid shut, leaving Asher to wonder if they had been turned away. Yet, the iron doors began to creak ominously as they opened. "Let's go inside," Nada said, leading Asher into the darkness beyond the doors. "Vernon suspects anything or..." Please vote using golden tickets and power stones. If you guys are enjoying and want to support the novel, join my Discord channel https://discord.gg/hjwkd4nb3z Resurgent. The atmosphere within the building was heavy, charged with an energy that made Asher feel as if this was definitely a place where people up to no good might enter. As they entered the small, dimly lit hall, the only source of light came from flickering candles scattered across an old, worn desk. Behind this desk sat a scrawny lady, her skin a dark shade of orange, almost glowing in the candlelight. Her nose was pointy, giving her an almost caricature-like appearance, and her eyes, a deep, vibrant green, flickered with mischief and knowledge far beyond her seemingly frail frame. Upon seeing Nada, a sly grin spread across the lady's face, her long fingers tapping rhythmically on the wooden surface. If it isn't the Midnight Wanderer," she crooned, her voice a peculiar mix of rasp and velvet. "And who's this? A new apprentice, perhaps?" Nada responded with a light chuckle, not correcting the lady on her alias. "You could say that, Grendler. We're here on specific business. We need access to the hidden chamber." Grendler's gaze shifted to Asher, sizing him up with a glance that felt almost invasive. "You have never brought a friend before, and he seems like a new face. Do you trust him?" She mused aloud, her gaze returning to Nada. "The chamber isn't for all eyes, you know that." "I trust him more than anything," Nada replied, her tone friendly yet firm, making Asher glance at her briefly with a hint of warmth. Grendler leaned back in her chair, the wood creaking under her slight weight. With a dramatic flourish, she pulled out a large, ancient-looking key from beneath the desk. "Very well," she said, her voice now serious, "I shall add his name to the list, but remember, the chamber only contains things that could kill you. Your friend should be careful about getting too tempted." Nada nodded, a gesture mirrored by Asher, though he only got more intrigued and curious about what kind of things were present in this chamber. "Follow me, then," Grendler announced, standing up. Her movements were surprisingly graceful for her appearance, and she led them through a door hidden behind an entrance that Asher hadn't noticed before. As they walked, The corridor twisted and turned, descending deeper into the heart of the building. The air grew cooler, and the silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the sound of their footsteps and the occasional drip of water echoing in the distance. Finally, they reached a heavy door, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to dance in the candlelight. Grendel inserted the key, turning it with a loud click that echoed ominously. The door swung open, revealing the hidden chamber beyond, shrouded in darkness and mystery. With a nod from Grendel, Neda, and Asher stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the unknown. As the iron door thudded shut behind them, plunging Asher and Neda into this dark chamber, Asher's gaze swept across the place they had entered. The air was thick with the scent of ancient parchment and forgotten magic. Shelves, burdened with the weight of countless old and dusty grimoires, parchments, and books, stretched into the dimness, their contents whispering secrets of a bygone eras. "What is this place really? Everything looks so old," Asher mumbled, his voice a soft intrusion into the silence that enveloped them as he stepped forward, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Neda, with the ease of one familiar with such sanctuaries, dusted off a book as she explained, "This place is the third chamber of forbidden past. There are only 3 such chambers in our world, which contain all kinds of old and forbidden arts, grimoires, and secret information on various kingdoms or clans, but each of them can only be accessed with a high price, and you can only buy one item in your entire lifetime." Asher browsed through the shelves, his fingers brushing against the spines of countless volumes. "The items here look quite precious. I don't understand why nobody bothered to plunder this place and take everything for themselves," he mused, the question hanging in the air like a challenge to the silence of the chamber. Neda's response was a soft chuckle. "It isn't that simple. The chambers of forbidden past have been maintained for thousands of years by powerful people from every corner of this world. Nobody would dare to be the first one to cause trouble and risk getting destroyed by the rest. But even if someone manages to keep them all at bay, each of the chambers has a powerful and mysterious self-destruction mechanism if somebody tries to compromise the entire chamber. That's more sophisticated than I expected." "No wonder," Asher mused, his respect for the chamber's guardians growing. "But you're forgetting one important thing. As that woman outside said, everything here are things most people don't want or wouldn't dare to use. It's called forbidden for a reason. So it's not worth the resources one would have to give up in hopes of benefiting from an item here at great risk of their life." Asher nodded as he hummed, "That does make sense." He then bobbed his head around and asked, "Now, what should I look for? Isn't there any magic arrays to quickly find what we are looking for?" Neda shook her head, her expression one of mild regret. "All the chambers run on powerful but ancient arrays, so, unfortunately, we have to manually search each item by its name. Look for a grimoire with the title Tome of the Nightmare Sword." "Tome of the Forbidden Nightmare Sword? It sounds like a powerful one indeed," Asher remarked, his interest piqued, eyes gleaming with anticipation. "It is indeed powerful, but well, you will find out," Neda replied, her smile cryptic yet encouraging. Asher chuckled, shaking his head in mild exasperation. "You are really keeping me in suspense here, huh?" Neda's knowing smile shone through. "Not as much as you, though. You still haven't told me how things went with your queen after you told her about us. Or did you not tell her yet?" Asher, his hands brushing over the spines of countless grimoires, sighed, the sound heavy with unspoken words. "I was about to tell you once we had a place to talk freely and comfortably, but since you asked now, well." He paused, his voice trailing off as he recounted the moment he had revealed his relationship with Neda to Rowena. The confession had unfolded in a way that left Neda's lips to part and her brows to raise. Neda's reaction was a mix of relief and surprise, her hand resting against her chest as if to calm her racing heart. "That went better than I expected. I didn't tell you to not bother you about it, but I was feeling quite guilty and ashamed all along. I was ready for any punishment if she didn't want me to get close to you, but it seems as if fate doesn't want us to be separate. She must really love you to give in like this." Asher's face mirrored the complexity of his emotions, a stormy sea of guilt, love, and loyalty. I know she is a better person than I am, and I may not deserve her, but I can't stay away from her. She is the reason I am standing here, otherwise, I could have. His voice faltered, lost in the unsaid, as his gaze turned distant, wondering how he would have ended up if only hate and anger existed within him. Nada, observing the conflict within him, offered a warm smile. I know, she is your world, just like you are already becoming mine. Nada. Asher's voice was a whisper, laden with emotions too complex to unravel, the name a confession and a plea all at once. He felt bad that he couldn't call her his own before everyone else yet. The search for the tome of the forbidden nightmare sword continued, a task that seemed to anchor Asher to the present, despite the doubts in his heart. And then, amidst the silence and the secrets, he found it. Hey, here it is, tome of the forbidden nightmare sword, he announced, a spark of triumph in his voice that quickly turned to astonishment as he opened the tome. What the? The words died in his throat as his eyes widened in disbelief, staring at the contents that lay before him. What did he see? Asher found himself utterly perplexed. His eyes widened in disbelief as he stared down at intricate diagrams of the male anatomy, specifically penises drawn from various perspectives. With furrowed brows, he muttered incredulously, "What sort of joke is this? Or did some drunkard compile this? Is this truly the right grimoire?" Grimoire name, Tome of the Forbidden Nightmare Sword, Part 1/2. Feast thy eyes upon the Tome of the Forbidden Nightmare Sword, a tome that relishes in the fall of not only the demonic but, more than anything, the radiant. Thine tainted manhood, wielding its unholy girth, shall be the bane of celestial maidens, as thy nightmare rod plunges through their defenses, stealing their light and leaving them craving more sin. This is the only grimoire that would transform thine mortal sword into an immortal sword with a forbidden power that can withstand radiant essence. Grade, immortal. What in the name of the seven hells? A broken bar. Asher felt as if he had to give props to whoever created this grimoire for making it sound more epic than it appeared to be. Though the creator had a weird way of writing it, it really seemed as if they were drunk when they cooked this up. Yet he actually found an immortal grimoire in this shitty place, and it was dusty enough to make it look like nobody wanted such a powerful one. And where was the second part? But can his cock really be able to withstand radiant essence if he masters this? He knew so far he had to shut down the mana circuits of hunters like Rachel and Amelia before having sex with them, since he didn't want their orgasm to contain their radiant essence, which could burn or sting his cock. Beside him, Nada suppressed a soft giggle before stepping closer to peer over his shoulder. She studied the controversial illustrations with mild amusement glinting in her eyes. Although it might seem far-fetched, she began, this particular grimoire happens to be one of the oldest within the chambers. There exist many rumors regarding its origin, that it was discovered inside a powerful beast's belly, or that it suddenly came up from the seven hells. Whatever people said, nobody really knows where it came from or where the second part is or if it even exists. Shaking his head dismissively, Asher replied, "People love to make up exaggerated stories about things they don't know much about. I mean, even I do feel this grimoire is quite mysterious and powerful, especially when it's an immortal grade grimoire that is even rarer than Devire's. But seriously, these crude drawings? If it's so good, would this grimoire still be catching dust here? Kingdoms would go to war over an immortal grimoire, anybody would." Chuckling gently, Nada responded, "It's precisely due to these crude depictions that everyone else failed. This grimoire claimed the lives of all who dared attempt utilizing it, instilling fear into anyone who caught wind of its deadly reputation. Over time, people simply chose to ignore its very existence altogether, until now." Her gaze turned serious as she placed a comforting hand on Asher's arm. "But you are unique, possessing an immortal bloodline. I firmly believe you alone hold the potential to unlock the secrets of this grimoire." Curiosity piqued despite his skepticism, Asher questioned hesitantly, "Do you genuinely think this will benefit me?" "How so?" With utmost sincerity, Nada elaborated, "Old experts who studied the runes said that if you master it, You can potentially connect a person's soul, mind, and body. It means your little dragon can stand a chance of making people like Esther remember what they have long forgotten or severed. Asher felt greatly interested in her words, though his brows furrowed as he asked the important question, "But would this kill me if I fail?" "I won't be surprised," Nada hummed thoughtfully before responding. "You can say it might be worse than death because it will kill your little dragon if you fail. In the best case scenario." As they journeyed, the outside world began to transform, making Asher raise his brows. The crimson light of their realm gradually gave way to a brightness that mimicked the daylight of Earth, a change so profound it felt as though they were crossing into another dimension. Asher's anticipation grew with each passing moment, his heart filled with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. Finally, the carriage came to a gentle halt. The sound of its wheels ceasing echoed softly in the tranquil air. Asher stepped out, his feet touching ground that felt both alien and familiar. Before him lay a landscape so lush and vibrant it took his breath away. Meadows stretched out towards the horizon, dotted with wildflowers that swayed gently in the breeze. A fountain, its waters sparkling under the sunlight, stood as a centerpiece among the greenery, surrounded by trees that whispered secrets of old. But it was the roses that captured Asher's heart, dark red roses, their petals glistening with dew, encircling the entire area in a display of nature's unmatched beauty. He looked up to see skies of azure, the sun hanging like a golden medallion, no different than the one that warmed the earth he knew. Wow! What is this place? How can something so beautiful exist in our world? Asher's voice was a whisper, a mix of awe and disbelief as his gaze swept across the haven that unfolded before him. Nada, stepping gracefully just a step behind him, her eyes reflecting the paradise as she said, "This is my real home. At least the one I always dreamed of living in. A place where everything is beautiful and peaceful with nothing to make you sad. I couldn't find such a place in our world, so I built one, even if it's not real. Maybe someday I might get to live in a real one with you," she finished, her eyes briefly glowing with a fervent light as she gazed upon his broad back. Asher turned to her, moved by the depth of her longing, the earnest desire in her heart to find solace in beauty, to create a sanctuary not just for herself but for the dreams she harbored. "Nada. I do wish that as well. Thank you for bringing me to your home," he said, knowing it must have taken her a lot of courage to show him this place. He could see the pride and softness in her eyes as she spoke of her creation, making him feel that there was a deeper reason why she created this. Nada's expression softened, her face illuminated by the gentle sunlight as she held his hand. "I look forward to that day. For now, I am happy that I can finally show this to someone I care about." Even though I felt happier here, it didn't take away the feeling of being alone. "I planned to show it to my children, but I am afraid they might not understand. Maybe I can some other day." Asher knew why she said her children may not understand. Creating a place that resembles the world of their most hated enemies and calling it home would definitely cause some doubts and misunderstandings, even if it was family. During that ambush by the Rust Blood clan at the celebration in the Draconese kingdom, when I saw that golden light in your beautiful eyes, I felt as if I was standing here, your warmth protecting me just like the sun does for the humans, unlike ours. At that moment, I realized that I had found a second home and that you also belonged in mine, so I couldn't wait to bring you here," Nada said as her bright red eyes peered into his eyes with warmth. Asher cradled her face, her words warming his heart. He could see that she didn't even care what exactly happened that day other than the fact that his light brought her warmth, and she wasn't even repulsed by it. He gazed at her entrancing red eyes as he said in a passionate tone, "One dire broken bar I will make your dream a reality. From that day onwards, you won't have to live in an illusion any longer. That's the least I can promise you." Asher thought about his plans for Earth, especially if he managed to complete the Last Judgment quest and save the demon realm once and for all. Nada pressed her cheek against his hand while enveloping it with hers. "You have already made most of it come true, and I would be happy enough as long as I get to have moments like these with you forever." Saying so, Nada wrapped her arms around his neck and craned her neck to reach for his lips. making Asher lean in as the two of them passionately kissed amidst the illusory rosy world. Asher sat naked in the middle of the meadow, his face flushed a deep red, his fingers trembled, not from lust but from concentration, as he attempted to carve the intricate runes into his mana circuit. Neda, equally naked and exquisite, sat atop him, her body a vision of sensuality as her figure danced up and down on his thick, hot member. Her cheeks were flushed as red as a berry, her head tossed back, long ruby red hair cascading down her bare shoulders, as she rode Asher with passionate, deliberate strokes. Asher's grip on her hips tightened as he focused on the delicate task at hand. The tome of the forbidden nightmare sword had been clear. The power he sought lay within the depths of this bizarre ritual. Apparently, to gain the power of this forbidden tome, one needed to carve the runes into their mana circuit while having sex with a woman of similar power or more. Asher couldn't believe how much more ridiculous this grimoire could be, since how the hell was a man supposed to concentrate on carving runes, a very delicate, sensitive process, while having sex? The sensation of Neda's warm, wet pussy enveloping him was almost too much to bear, but the pain of carving the runes into his manhood was even more distracting. His face contorted in a mask of concentration and discomfort, beads of sweat forming on his brow. He felt like his cock was being sliced into pieces with each passing second, to the point he feared whether he was really going to lose it. Each of the runes he carved was so powerful that they threatened to obliterate not only the mana circuit but the veins and flesh of his cock. The runes that were similar in power was contained in the Tome of the Fallen Souls. But even that was an immortal-grade grimoire. Neda looked up at him with concern, her hips stalling momentarily. "You can do it, Asher. Just focus on the feeling inside me. Don't let the pain get to you," she cooed, her voice soothing and encouraging. Her words were like a soothing wind to his mind, and he began to redirect some of his focus to the cold warmth of her pussy enveloping his cock, bathing it with her love and the simmering heat threatening to spill out and flood her cave. Yet he couldn't maintain that focus for too long as the pain continued to stab into his cock. Asher grunted, gritting his teeth as he redoubled his efforts. The runes were so close to being complete that he could almost taste it. Neda resumed her ministrations, her hips resuming their sensual rhythm. 13-15. But the closer he got, the more he realized how dangerous and painful they were. He didn't even know if he could get to the last one. The pain was excruciating, his fingers trembling as they etched the final strokes into his sensitive flesh. The sensation was unlike anything he'd ever felt, both agonizing and arousing. He groaned, his hips bucking involuntarily, sending his demonic member even deeper inside her. Neda's eyes widened, her own pleasure momentarily forgotten as she felt his shaft throb and swell within her, stretching her walls further. She gasped, her moan of surprise echoing. The sight of his engorged member, glowing with a dark green light, only heightened her arousal. "You are close, Asher, hon, it's almost over," Neda gasped as she encouraged him even more upon seeing that he was so close to getting it over with. "No, a broken barrier, broken barrier, broken barrier." Asher gasped in agonizing pain as he was struggling to finish the final strokes, feeling as if his cock was about to explode. Just as Asher thought he had hit his limit, something shifted within him. A sudden surge of energy coursed through his veins, setting every cell alight with an intensity that transcended physical sensations. It was as if time itself slowed down, giving him the clarity he desperately needed. In this heightened state of awareness, he became acutely conscious of not just his own existence but also of Neda's presence beside him. He could hear her heart beat, feel the sensations she was feeling, and feel the overflowing love she had for him, which was deeper than he had ever expected. He had no idea she loved him this much. In this small, illusory world, the sun was still shining brightly as ever without the slightest change in the last 12 hours, even though on the outside, night had long passed, and it was already morning. In these 12 hours, nestled amidst a breathtaking garden of ethereal roses, two naked forms were engaged in a passionate tryst without rest, and now their naked figures lay intertwined on the soft, fragrant ground, and the very air still seemed to hum with the vestiges of their intense passion. The woman lay spent and delirious, as though every ounce of her energy had been siphoned away. Her body glistened with the sheen of sweat, her bright red eyes hazy with the aftermath of ecstasy. The man, however, reclined beside her, his muscular frame brimming with vigor, and his thick, engorged manhood standing proudly erect with dark green veins ominously glowing over it. It was as if it wasn't satisfied yet after making the woman climax a couple dozen times while pouring its hot milk into her every single time she came. If not for him and Nada occasionally taking turns to clean up, she would have been swimming in a pool of his thick, hot milk. You really had to take things this far to get back at me for losing to me during our first time? Nada managed to say between labored breaths, her weak smile tinged with both exhaustion and amusement. Asher's hand caressed her shapely, bare back with tenderness, his charming grin unwavering. I told you, I always keep my promises. Even if I fail, I will always have my victory. Sooner or later. Nada chuckled softly, her smile tinged with satisfaction. Now, I'm confident that if Esther had any inkling of what was in store for her, she would be deeply regretting signing that contract a broken bar more than anything in her life. Asher's eyes gleamed, though they narrowed as he looked at the new passive ability, skill, and talent he had obtained. Passive ability, ominous allure, thine tainted form, now infused with the very essence of the forbidden rod, exudes an irresistible aura of hellish charm. Both demonic and radiant beauties alike shall find themselves inexorably drawn to thee, their gaze transfixed by the corruptive yet forbidden power that pulses through thy veins. The more they stare, the more susceptible they become to thy unholy charms. Talent, nightmare embrace, thine unholy embrace shall leave the purest of maidens shuddering with soul-melting ecstasy. Upon dealing a critical strike, thou shalt drain 5% of your stats from theirs, imbuing your immortal rod with extra power and fueling their carnal desires. 0.25 Skill, Nightmare Surge, channel the tainted power within thy nightmare sword, unleashing a torrent of forbidden energy. Thou mayst store up to 100% of thy STR and X as extra power, which thou can unleash at thy discretion. The more power thou unleashes at once, the more dangerous the side effects shall be. 0.35 Cost, 750 MP, HP per 1%, cooldown, 10 minutes, cast time, 1 second per 1%, 0.25. Asher blinked in disbelief, surprised by how ridiculously powerful the abilities were, but what kind of side effects were they talking about? Lock and loaded. Please vote using golden tickets and power stones. If you guys are enjoying and want to support the novel, join my Discord channel https://discord.gg/hjwkd4nb3z Resurgent. The Grand Hall of the Drethorn Castle, with its towering pillars and the flickering light of torches, served as a symbol of the power and legacy of its inhabitants. It was here that Esther, cloaked in the authority and grace befitting her station, made her silent procession back to the heart of her domain. As she approached, Thorin, surrounded by his vassals, stood stoically, engaged in discussion, but suddenly stopped as she got close enough. His voice, aloof yet laden with unspoken urgency, cut through the murmurs of his council. Is it done? He inquired, his gaze briefly intersecting Esther's path. The vassals, sensing the gravity of the moment, bowed their heads in deference, their whispers fading into silence. Esther, without breaking her stride or meeting his gaze, responded succinctly, "It will be soon." Her voice was devoid of emotion yet carried undeniable confidence. Thorin hummed, an acknowledgement steeped in satisfaction, before turning back to his council, his demeanor unchanging as he resumed the discussion. Esther continued on, her steps echoing softly in the vastness of the hall, ascending the stairs before walking into one of the corridors. It was there, amidst the shadows and light, that a voice called out, "Mother." Esther halted, the air around her stilling as she turned to face the source of the inquiry. Sabina, her daughter, approached with a curious look. "Mother, how did it go? Did you get it? My poor brother has been suffering a lot," she asked with her hand on her chest, her concern for Edmund palpable in her voice. Esther, her expression cool and measured, replied, "I will. It is only a matter of days or maybe less." Sabina's eyebrows arched, inwardly feeling dismayed by such a confident response from her mother. "So he really doesn't stand a chance, and we will get what we want?" She pressed, seeking confirmation. With a silent nod, Esther affirmed their path, her voice steady as she outlined the future. "Once Edmund receives it back, we will prepare for your marriage with him. We have delayed it too long, and you are not getting any younger. Edmund isn't strong enough. But your offspring will be better. This house needs a powerful leader after my and your father's time." Behind her back, Sabina's fist clenched as she gave a cool smile. "Of course, mother, I will make sure you will get the most powerful grandson ever," she promised, masking the turmoil within. Esther offered a nod, her expression impassive. Without another word, she turned, her steps carrying her away from Sabina. The moment Esther left, Sabina rushed to her favorite room where a couple of naked slaves were hanging from the ceiling, their bodies riddled with blood and scars. She took out a barbed whip in one hand as a sinister smirk formed on her lips. Seeing her figure, the slaves who were barely conscious had their eyes shiver, and the air thickened with the copper tang of fear and the musky scent of sweat. She slowly walked and stopped before a burly man and, without warning, used her whip to lash at his shriveled cock. "Is he messing around, or did I overestimate him?" Sabina mumbled as she kept lashing the broken man while contemplating her future. "Don't worry, everyone, no man can even take on 2 of us, let alone 50 of us. This will be easier than we think," the leader among them with the voluptuous bust whispered with a confident smile. However, the deeper they walked in, the more the air within the tower was getting heavier with anticipation and dread, the very air thick enough to choke on. Their hearts pounded in their chests as they adjusted their vision to the dimly lit space, but suddenly, some of them gasped upon hearing a footstep resounding in the chamber, heavy and deliberate, sending shivers down their spines. Their eyes widened as they beheld a tall, muscular silhouette in the center of the room. They could make out his every muscle rippling under his skin, and a sense of foreboding washed over them. As their eyes adjusted further, they noticed his glowing, dark yellow irises, ominous and otherworldly. "It can't be broken," the women gasped in shock, disbelief, and a lingering sense of excitement. Were they really going to teach the king himself? What made their blood run hotter, however, was the slow, gradual rise of something thick and menacing beneath his loincloth. It began to glow with a sickly, ominous dark green light, revealing its twisted, engorged form. "Devils. Save you, broken bar." The woman in the front whimpered, her voice barely a whisper while the rest looked on with terror as their king began to stride towards them, his monstrous member throbbing with every step. And soon enough, for hours on end, the tower reverberated with the cacophony of lust and debauchery, the very walls seemingly quaking under the weight of their passionate cries. The air within the structure grew thick with the heady scent of desire, the floor sticky with the evidence of their depraved union. One by one, the moans of the 50 mature beauties faded away, until the tower fell into an unsettling silence. Sabina, standing outside, raised an eyebrow. "They took this much time to bring him down?" She mused aloud, "But enough is enough." Swiftly, she made her way into the den of iniquity, expecting to find a man defeated and bruised from a battle against 50 experienced and talented women. However, the sight that greeted her made her jaw slack. The 50 women lay in various states of undress, their bodies intertwined in a macabre tangle of limbs, their expressions frozen in ecstasy, their naked figures bathed in a hot, milky, ominous substance that glowed with an otherworldly light. The man surprisingly stood tall, naked, and proud amongst the sea of debauchery, his glowing dark yellow eyes locked onto Sabina's as he walked past the naked bodies lying beside his feet. I came here to save my brother. I will do anything to save his future, so please have mercy," Sabina said, her voice shaky, though making it hard for one to guess whether it was from nervousness or excitement of something primal, especially when her gaze was glued onto a certain little dragon. Asher's smirk only deepened as he cracked his knuckles. "What a caring sister you are, but since you are willing to do anything, we are going to have a talk about the things I am going to make you do for me." His gargantuan member began to throb, lengthening and thickening before Sabina's eyes, which began to widen along with them. Saying so, he began to walk towards Sabina, who came out of her reverie as she licked her lips, saliva dripping off her tongue. "You better make it a very long talk, pretty boy." After several more hours slipped away, Asher finally emerged from the tower, his polished black robes shimmering under the fading light. The colossal door groaned as it started to shut behind him, its heavy thud echoing through the silent landscape. Meanwhile, back inside the tower, Sabina's nude form twisted limply from the center of the high-ceilinged room, her pale skin tinted crimson and glistening with a hot, milky fluid that clung to her like a second skin, pooling between her legs and trickling down her thighs. Her body was bruised from head to toe with lash marks riddling her body, and yet there was no hint of discomfort or pain in her cloudy eyes. Her lips parted, releasing a slurred utterance filled with insanity and lust. "Oh mother ... I feel sorry for what that little monster is going to do to you ... but at least you will one day see the grandson you want ... He. Meanwhile, after a couple hours, Esther, oblivious to the debauchery that happened within the tower, made her way towards it, her heart calm as a pool. She had received a cryptic message from Asher, asking her to meet him here, of all places, where they would be free from prying eyes and gossip. She didn't mind, since she preferred this as well rather than let others speculate her business with Asher. Dressed in her usual off-shoulder dark blue gown, she ventured inside, her heels clacking against the cold, hard floor. The interior of the tower was dimly lit with dark golden lights, casting an ominous glow about the place. In the center of the large hall, on a throne-like chair, sat Asher, clad in casual black robes that revealed his chiseled, muscular torso. And something else, his manhood, even in its flaccid state, was a sight to behold, long and thick in ways that would send a shiver down any woman's spine, though Esther didn't even bother to look. "You are right on time," he said, getting to his feet. "Makes me wonder if you have been looking forward to this?" His voice was as smooth as honey, laced with an ominous undertone that Esther couldn't quite place. Unfazed, Esther responded flatly, "Yes, so that I can get this over with sooner than it needs to be." Yet, despite her nonchalant demeanor, Esther couldn't shake off an unsettling transformation surrounding Asher. A mysterious pull seemed to emanate from him, compelling her attention even when every fiber of her being screamed caution. He was already known as the most charming and handsome man in the kingdom, though she had never felt anything. Yet now, why was she feeling as if that such a claim was indeed true? Her gaze oddly lingered on the mesmerizing depth of his dark yellow irises, reminiscent of rich amber gleaming beneath the soft glow of antiquated lanterns. She noted the exquisitely carved lines defining his expansive eight-pack abdomen, each muscle contracting rhythmically in synchronicity, exemplifying raw strength encased in finessed alien form. Her attention shifted involuntarily to his robust silhouette, sculpted by nature itself, stretching beyond ordinary confines. The sight stirred something primal within her, something she didn't know she had. Further up, her eyes traced the luxurious length of his silky moon-white hair, flowing gracefully like ethereal waterfalls cascading down snowy mountainsides. She couldn't help but also notice the unblemished expanse of his dove-gray complexion, as smooth and flawless as handcrafted porcelain. Each contour reflected pure elegance untouched by imperfections or blemishes. Finally, Esther's gaze came to rest upon an unusual object that she had tried to ignore earlier. The impressive size and stature of his long, flaccid member. Even in its relaxed state, it commanded respect, hinting at dormant might lurking beneath its surface. The thickness rivaled the circumference of a stout tree trunk, tapering gently towards the base, making her wonder if he was a beast or a man. No, a broken bar. Not even beasts would have something that looks this majestic. But she then briefly channeled her concentration, easily fighting off this mysterious influence, and wondered why she was even thinking about such inconsequential things, especially about him. Not once had she encountered such an odd thing merely from looking at someone. It made her wonder if he did something to himself. Asher began circling Esther, his deep voice resonating smoothly. "I hope you won't mind me asking ... but have you ever felt what it is like to be a woman who is actually living instead of a life that resembles a dead one? Like falling in love, getting jealous, feeling pleasure, or craving for something? Haven't you felt curious about what all this feels like?" He teased the lace of her bra, his fingers dipping below the fabric to brush against her shivering half-hardened nipples, and teased them as he said, "Why are you holding back? Your body is shivering, begging you to let me satisfy it. Let go of yourself, at least for a second." Esther's breath caught in her throat, her body betraying her with its response to his touch while trying to block out his attempts to tempt her. A shiver ran down her spine as he slid his fingers down her stomach, stopping just short of where she needed him the most. Her breathing quickened, her chest rising and falling with each ragged breath. "Never a broken bar," she mumbled firmly, though her voice was weaker than usual. "You can't say never to an inevitable force like me," Asher said with a devilish smile as his lips once again found hers in a hungry kiss, his tongue seeking entrance to her mouth. Esther resisted at first, but the sensations coursing through her body were too much to bear. She couldn't maintain her focus on every part of her body, especially since his hands were stroking the skin of her navel, dangerously above her pelvis. It was either her mouth or the region down there, and so, with a whimper, she made the choice of making a sacrifice, letting her tongue tangle with his in a passionate dance. Each stolen breath amplified the intensity building between them, escalating past the tipping point recklessly. She could feel her cold body heating up slowly, and without her knowing, a faint reddish hue had already colored her pale, cold cheeks. Overwhelmed by unfamiliar feelings, she battled to retain composure, focusing intensely on containing the storm raging wildly inside her. But all of a sudden, Asher's erection, thick and throbbing, slipped between her thighs, making her brows furrow deeply. It felt thicker than it looked, and she could feel the throbbing veins pressing against the unusually sensitive skin of her inner thighs. But what made it worse was when the tip of his hot member pressed against her vulva, threatening to tear through her panties and invade her fortress. She gathered all her willpower to resist the wet flames threatening to pool down there, yet, defiance proved futile when he suddenly started to grind against her defenseless spot, inciting flames to dance erratically within her. She tried to pull away in nervousness, but that only made him increase his pace, grinding her harder down there. Suddenly, her world spun out of focus, replaced by swirling clouds of ecstasy, dragging her helplessly toward the edge of an exhilarating precipice. Fear gripped her heart as she scrambled madly to anchor herself securely, but failed miserably against the tidal wave of rapture sweeping her far beyond known territory. In mere moments, the inferno consumed her whole, obliterating barriers erected carefully over centuries. Her exclamation mark tilde caught off guard. She released a throaty cry, relinquishing restraint entirely unconsciously as he let go of her lips. A torrent of delight erupted violently, wetting her panties, streaming down her legs in rivulets. She gasped as she suddenly felt numb and weak, losing her grip and about to fall to the ground, though Asher kept her standing by tightening his arm's grip around her bare waist. A broken bar. Esther struggled to catch her breath, shocked and confused by what just happened. At a broken bar. By what she just felt. A broken bar, the strange feeling that made her forget everything for a moment. Instead, all she felt was her body and mind getting released from invisible chains that she didn't know existed, yet she was terrified by how she had no control over it, by how this sensation left her at the mercy of someone else, and how she even forgot herself for a moment to the point she let out a shameful sound. No matter how cold a woman's body is, it always melts when faced with the fire of passion, Asher said with a smug smile as he looked at her breathless state. Oh boy. How much is he going to melt her? Asher wiped off some of the cold liquid trickling down her supple thighs, and triumphantly, he displayed evidence on his fingertips, smiling devilishly, proclaiming, "Look at that, your first orgasm. You lost, and not even 2 minutes passed, nor did I even penetrate you. It looks like you came so easily because you had never experienced it before. What a pity." You missed out on this for your entire life so far. Esther's eyes widened in disbelief as the foreign, unfamiliar, and oily liquid slid down Asher's fingers. It was her essence, the very proof of her lost composure, and she couldn't believe it had come from her body. The sight was both alien and humiliating, as if every ounce of her hard-earned control had been stripped away by this one singular moment. Asher sensually licked her essence and sighed with a blissful look. Wah. So cold but sweet, it quenches my thirst better than any cold drink. I should definitely seek you out whenever I am going somewhere hot. Nausea bubbled within her gut, mixing with a volatile concoction of shame and frustration. She had trained so hard to keep her senses and emotions in check, and yet the sight before her made her feel like she had failed. Her entire life's efforts amounting to her ending up watching him do this. She felt like she lost all face, especially when this happened before a junior, this young alien who was keeping the future of her house hostage. Her expression darkened, her fists clenching at her sides, desperate to regain some semblance of her shattered pride. Feeling cold rage she had never felt before, Esther pushed him away and said coldly, I haven't lost yet. I want you to try again. And all I have to do is make you lose 2 more times since you have already lost once. Esther was more than determined to make sure to prevent him from making her climax 2 more times. She already did it once, and she can do it again. She just had to pull herself together. Seizing her nape, Asher yanked her near, sneering, soon you'll learn when to give up. Not that I'm going to let you. His voice was low and confident, as if her defiance only spurred him on further. Without any warning, he tore away her bra, revealing her perfect, round breasts, and he didn't waste a second before sucking them in with his hungry mouth. They were so soft and supple, similar in size to Nada's, though Nada's breasts were more round and perfect. Esther shut her lips firmly, suppressing any sounds she was about to make as lightning bolts of pleasure rippled through her breasts, her nipples hardening despite all her efforts to sever such sensations. The sensation was overwhelming, and she fought to keep her cool while feeling her breasts getting soaked with his hot saliva, but her eyes widened as she felt him tugging at her panties, tearing it away without mercy, revealing her soaked core to his heated gaze. Heat crept up her cheeks, but before she could even process the invasion of her private zone, she felt the tip of his monstrous member nudging at her moist entrance. For the first time in her life, she felt her heart pounding in anxiety since, for some reason, she was losing control of her body, and it was common knowledge that a woman's most sensitive area was down there. If he had already made her orgasm by just kissing and teasing her body with his touch, then the idea of what might happen when he entered her made her feel a sense of dread. But just as she was about to collect her thoughts, Asher pinned her wrists behind her back, gripped her left thigh, and lifted it as he said with a charming smile, you are about to feel something you have never felt before in your life. Esther's breath froze, her glistening torso pressing against his warm body, feeling even more nervous upon hearing his words. You. Before Esther could form a sentence, Asher thrust himself inside her, tearing through her resistance as if it were nothing while causing her eyes to bulge. Esther's world shattered into a million shards of blinding pain and white-hot pleasure, unable to keep her lips sealed as the sensation made her momentarily lose control of every single nerve in her body. The burning sensation as he stretched her walls to their limits was unlike anything she'd ever felt, and she couldn't help but arch her back unconsciously, her nails digging into his muscular shoulders. The feeling of him filling her so completely, touching places that had long been dormant, was terrifyingly exhilarating. Her body trembled beneath him, her muscles clenching around him involuntarily. Don't catch your breath yet, NGH. He withdrew just as slowly as he'd entered her, only to plunge back in with renewed force, making her let out a loud, unadulterated moan for the first time in her life. The moment his monstrous member touched the deepest spot when he plunged into her, Esther's world combusted into a storm of uncharted sensations. His hard, hot length stroking her inner walls sent waves of searing heat coursing through her body, igniting dormant nerves she'd long thought dead. It was as if all the senses she had suppressed for almost 2 centuries had come back with a vengeance, drowning her body with all these sensations. Each touch, each caress, every thrust amplified 1,000-fold. Her senses, dulled by years of rigid control, roared back to life, and her body hummed with an awareness she'd never known existed. The sensual stretching of her walls, the tempting friction as he pulled back and plunged forward again, the way her slickness coated their joined bodies, it was all too much and yet left her with a sense of desire she wasn't familiar with. Every inch of her skin felt alive, tingling and prickling with heightened sensitivity. Her breasts ached, heavy and sensitive, her nipples akin to hardened pebbles craving for something. Hang tilde dot 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 hang tilde dot 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 hoon. Her breath came in pants as she tried to make sense of this newfound awakening, her hands gripping his shoulders as if her life depended on it. With each thrust, the tension within her core coiled tighter and tighter, a molten heat pooling between her thighs. The feeling was both terrifying and intoxicating, the knowledge that she was on the brink of shattering her defenses completely in front of someone who could be said to be the worst enemy of her house right now. If she had a choice, she would have already turned him into a slave using his corpse, and yet this very same enemy was eliciting foreign yet humiliating sensations and reactions from her while taking away her control of her body. His gaze, dark and hungry, only fueled the inferno within her. His eyes locked on hers as if he could see every thought, every emotion she tried to hide. Your tightness. It's exquisite, he groaned, his eyes wild with lust. It's a pity a broken bar. A sexy woman like you has never felt what it feels like to be a real woman. You should blame your husband for never satisfying you, Asher said with a grunt of pleasure and disapproval. Esther felt her face burn in shame yet also with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. That's nonny a broken bar of your Arhan! Tilde. Her eyes suddenly widened when he twisted her nipples in an unnatural direction, making pain and pleasure flood her nerves, and that was the final blow to her willpower, which was barely holding her body from exploding down there. So you like pain as well? I knew it. You thorns are a different breed. Before she could process his words, he pinched her clit and slammed his thick member deep inside her once more, his hips colliding with her sweat-slicked pelvis. Her Tilde S top hit. Esther gasped, her eyes watering as she gritted her teeth, desperate to maintain her composure. Blood trickled from her lips, the result of her futile attempt to muffle her moans. Asher, however, was relentless. Stop hurting yourself from enjoying what you need. His words were punctuated by his thrusts, each one sending her closer to the edge. I will come with you. To not make you feel alone, he growled, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated through her very core. Esther's eyes widened as the final barrier she'd erected crumbled under his relentless onslaught, her body arching to meet his every thrust. He sucked the blood from her bitten lip, his tongue lapping at the wound as he continued to plunge into her with abandon. For some reason, the scent of his blood smelled irresistible to her as he sucked on her tongue, shattering her final defense. Her eyelids fluttered, her body going limp as her inner walls clenched around him, as if her body had a mind of its own, determined to bring them both to the precipice and trying to milk him of his seed. At the same time, she felt herself release. Her climax tore through her like a tempest, leaving her trembling and spent in its wake. Cold fluids gushed out and bathed Asher's cock, coinciding with his own culmination. With a final, visceral groan, he stiffened above her, his member throbbing within her as he released his seed, his scalding hot, sticky cum flooding her womb and filling her in a way she'd never before experienced. Esther's body violently shuddered as she lost control of her body completely and strangely felt some of her strength getting drained. Asher pulled out, his member glistening with their combined juices, and Esther whimpered as his girth left her, her soft inner walls clenching in response before he let go of her. Upon hitting the ground, gravity took effect, forcing realization of her situation. Hot semen flowed generously, escaping her swollen labia, joining the earlier flood on her inner thighs. Asher smirked down at her, a smug look in his eyes that she both loathed and, to her horror, found eerily stimulating. So, tell me, how does it feel to be truly alive? occasionally missing content. Please report errors in time. Esther lay panting, still reeling from the intensity of her orgasm, and looked at her uncontrollable shivering hands and legs with horror. She couldn't believe her body was betraying her like this. Trembling in the aftermath of her second climax, Asher smirked down at her, a smug look in his eyes that she both loathed and, to her horror, found slightly stimulating. So, tell me, how does it feel to be truly alive? His words jolted her back to reality, and she shot him a cold, grudging glare. What did you do to me? You can't break the rules. She panted. She was sure he'd done something to make her feel things she shouldn't, to make her lose control so completely. You are being unusually vocal now, Asher scoffed as he sauntered towards Esther, his gait confident. His lengthy appendage hung limp between his legs, yet the mere presence of it sent chills down Esther's spine. Now that she had a good look, its thickness alone seemed overwhelming, threatening to consume her whole being. The sight of it was now like a nightmare for her. Afraid of its power and what it can make her do, she couldn't help but glance sideways, her eyes darting towards where his hand rested casually on his hip, and the moment he stood beside her, his nightmarish member brushed past her cheek like a ghostly whisper, making her unconsciously shiver upon remembering the havoc it caused inside her. She couldn't help but glance sideways, her eyes darting towards where his hand rested casually on his hip, and the moment he stood beside her, his nightmarish member brushed past her cheek like a ghostly whisper, making her unconsciously shiver upon remembering the havoc it caused inside her. You said it yourself, Asher said, a cold smile playing on his lips. I can't use any tricks without breaking the contract. This is just how I am. It's not my fault you're not strong enough. Esther felt her face burn with shame upon hearing this junior looking down on her and talking to her with contempt. She wouldn't care less if he simply said it, but she knew that he was right. She hated to admit the fact that she lost a broken bar not once but twice against someone so young and arrogant. She had lost all face as the lady of House Thorn. What would Thorn think? What would her children think? She had always taught her 3 children to never succumb to any desire or emotion or even any sensation, and yet a broken bar. Here she was, a broken bar, kneeling before him, and worst of all, despite everything, she couldn't deny that part of her found it dangerously tempting. A broken bar, that blissful sensation where no burdens of duty or responsibility existed but only pure bliss. And so she clenched her jaw and said, I haven't truly lost yet. You still have to make me lose one more time, but I want to continue tomorrow. I am not in a state to continue now. Esther didn't want to continue and risk losing since she had no idea what was wrong with her. She wanted to return home and find out the problem before he continued to take advantage of her in her weakened state. She didn't expect an orgasm to make her end up feeling weak and numb. Do all women feel the same? She didn't like how chaotic her thoughts were and the tingling sensation down there, eliciting even more unnecessary sensations in her. But just as she struggled to get up, Asher lunged forward, grabbing Esther's delicate wrists with lightning speed. He tightened his hold on her wrists, pulling them above her head as she dangled limply from his grasp. Her bare feet barely touched the ground, struggling to maintain balance. His sudden movement startled her, causing her heart to race faster than ever. You don't get to leave as you please. As per the contract, I get to decide how many times I can try to make you come for me, not you, Asher said as his fingers stroked her glistening breasts. Before she could utter a word, Asher flicked his wrist, and out came sinister chains that erupted from the walls, slithering their way toward Esther. They wound tightly around her wrists and ankles, securing her to the spot like a fly trapped in a web. The cold metal bit into her sensitive skin, sending shockwaves of discomfort rippling through her already fatigued frame upon finding her limbs stretched in a demeaning position. Cold anger surged within her as she tugged at the restraints, her wide eyes fixed on Asher. What is the meaning of this? She demanded, her voice quivering slightly as she spoke. This goes against the terms of our agreement. Despite her protests, the chains remained firmly fastened, immobilizing her completely, while his smile only made her uneasy. Don't think I am going to try to hurt you or anything. I am only going to show you a good time. After all, it is up to me how I get to make you come, right? Esther clenched her fists as she stopped trying to break free, bitterly acknowledging that he was right. She regretted not putting out specific rules. Why would she when she was completely confident that he couldn't make her feel anything no matter what he did? She didn't even care if he tortured her. She wouldn't know any pain, but if only she had known what was going to happen. A broken bar now. Why don't I put this on for you? A broken bar. Saying so, Asha wrapped a black fabric around her eyes, making her world pitch black and feel nervous for some reason. Since you want to leave as soon as possible, I am going to make you an offer. If you beg for my dick and ask me to fuck you as hard as possible, I may let you go after one more try, but if you don't, I will just keep on going until I get tired, which could be forever, Asha said as his lips curved. Esther couldn't believe what he just heard. She felt that he must think so lowly of her after seeing her in a pathetic state, and so determined to not lose and end his arrogance once and for all. She said coldly while her bare breasts heaved up and down, I will never give you that satisfaction. You are free to try whatever you want. I am a bit confused. Are you saying that to not satisfy me or to satisfy yourself? Asha smirked at her defiance while Esther's face reddened even more with more than just anger. Ads by Pub Futcher. But before she could retort, he reached out to grab hold of her slender figure. Tilde with a painful squeeze. He kneaded her soft flesh, causing Esther to gasp and bite back a cry of discomfort. Without warning, his other hand found its way between her legs, parting them forcefully as he thrust himself inside her. She cried out in shock and pleasure, unable to contain herself any longer as Asha filled her completely. Despite her best efforts, she couldn't help but respond to his rough treatment, her body trembling under each powerful stroke. HNNMGH! He continued to piston in and out of her, merciless in his pursuit of dominance over her, and with the blindfold covering her eyes, Esther could feel every inch of him penetrating deeper within her core. Each time their bodies collided, it sent waves of sensation throughout her entire being, leaving her dizzy and delirious with pleasure and pain from having her breasts abused by his large, rough hands. Each time his scorching hot member plunged deep into her, her body would lose all control, and her thoughts would disperse until only the pleasure and pain occupied her mind and body, while she also couldn't muffle her moans any longer. With every brutal thrust, Esther's resolve crumbled away, replaced by sheer ecstasy and agony. It didn't even take a minute before another wave of euphoria crashed over her, leaving her limp and panting underneath him while the blindfold on her eyes heightened the overwhelming sensation flowing through her nerves. That's right, surrender to me, for you have lost for real, Asha murmured, tracing her wet red lips with his thumb, but beg me for more, and maybe I'll show you mercy. And no, a broken bar. Wait, a broken bar, Esther whispered feebly. But Asha ignored her protests, driving himself into her once again. This time, however, he lifted her legs up and crossed them over his shoulders, sinking impossibly deeper inside of her. A strangled yelp echoed in the dark hall as her spine arched gracefully in the air, bending her form into an arc. The new angle brought forth indescribable pleasure that overwhelmed Esther's senses, igniting sparks behind her eyelids. Within the darkness, underneath Asha's relentless assault, Esther's feeble attempts to halt his advances faltered. Her world spun dizzily, narrowing down to the point where their bodies became one. The overwhelming thickness stretching her walls left little space for reason. Instead, primal desire took over, urging her towards an edge she both dreaded and yearned for. Just when she thought she couldn't handle any more, Asha pulled almost entirely out, teasing her entrance with his tip, but the sudden emptiness caused by his act left an uncontrollable itch within her moist cave. She knew she can make it go away by telling him what he wanted to hear, but her mind struggled to lower herself even more. But this itch was rapidly growing, gnawing at her nerves, tormenting her, and making her crave something monstrous, something forbidden to fill her up again. Say it, he demanded, gripping her thighs tightly, Tell me those magical words, beg for it. Despite her pride screaming otherwise, Esther just wanted to get rid of this itch before it consumed her fully. In desperation, she finally relented, whimpering, "Please." He broken bar P put it in exclamation mark tilde. Occasionally missing content. Please report errors in time. Hang exclamation mark tilde and exclamation mark tilde how exclamation mark tilde. Tell me what you want me to do, or I just might feel like extending this for a day. I want you to HNNG exclamation mark tilde pour your seed inside me tilde hang exclamation mark tilde. Aren't you quite the noble slut for craving another man's seed despite being married? But let me grant you your wish. NNMGNH exclamation mark tilde. As hours passed in the dark hall of the tower, a sensual scene unfolded as the regal and aloof lady of House Thorn found herself ensnared in an exquisite web of desire. Nobody who knew her could even imagine hearing such loud, silky moans or such obscene words coming out of her cold, dignified lips. She was infamously known for being extremely cold and ruthless, being able to take any hard decision without any hesitation. Nobody had ever seen her get angry, sad, or happy. At this point, people had come to accept that the Thrones, like Esther and her husband, had their facial muscles become dormant from having their emotions severed. Even if they might feel any emotion, people thought it wouldn't show on their faces due to how their facial muscles had adapted to their corpse-like demeanor. People wouldn't dare to get close to or interact with them since it felt no different than trying to talk to a corpsey broken bar powerful one at that. Yet now, her once frigid demeanor has been shattered, leaving only a quivering mass of insatiable need in its wake. Esther's heart was beating wildly within her chest as she felt the heat emanating from this alien's monstrous member, filling her up each time he forced himself into her. The cool metal chains that bind her to the stone walls seem almost cruel now, trapping her in this moment of unparalleled ecstasy. A soft whimper escaped her lips, each time she strained against her restraints, desperate for more contact, more sensation without her realizing it. His strong hands were dipping into her silken tresses, fisting them tightly, keeping her head pulled back, exposing her red and delicate neck while ravaging her from behind and clutching her neck hard enough to choke her from time to time. And at times, he would shift her hand to either pinch her clit hard or firmly squeeze her reddened breasts together. Or the most intimate one was when he would pull her tongue out with his hot mouth and ravage it within his scorching embrace. Her pale body was riddled with red marks from head to toe, and yet the pain was the last thing in her mind, especially when her lower abdomen was filled to the brim and warm with his seed. With each savage thrust, Asher claimed ownership over Esther's trembling body, driving deeper and harder until she could barely breathe. Droplets of sweat slapped out of their skin each time their glistening bodies slammed against each other. She writhed beneath him, mewling pitifully as the waves of pleasure crashed over her again and again while his tongue occasionally licked along her warm nape. She had lost count of the number of times she had orgasmed and lost the sense of time. It was too late when she realized that he had tricked her with his words, taking advantage of her desperate situation to make her say the words he wanted her to say, hoping he would stop. But all he did was use the same words as his excuse. "I never said I will stop. But I may stop if you keep saying the magical words to my satisfaction. If you don't a broken bar I can keep doing this all day and more." The blindfold that covered her eyes did nothing to dull the intensity of the experience. If anything, it heightened her other senses, making each touch, each taste, all the more potent. She never knew there existed emotions and sensations that could make one lose touch with reality. She now realized why her ancestors always stressed that they should never take their training lightly and that they had to suppress their emotions due to how dangerous they could get. But even after all the harsh training she went through for decades, how could a junior break everything she learned like this? Not only did her willpower crumble, but she couldn't even control a single muscle or nerve in her body. Her mouth hung open, tongue darting out to wet her dry lips as her body begged for release. She knew Asher was an enemy of her house and that he deserved to become their slave for every offense he did towards their house. and yet she was ashamed of herself upon feeling her body craving for his monstrous meaty member and for feeling so good to the point she had thoughts of wanting to continue this instead of trying to make him stop. But while she was busy battling with her mind and body, Asher showed no mercy, mercilessly continuing his assault on her willing flesh while choking the air out of her lungs. Every muscle in Esther's body coiled tight, tension building higher and higher until it threatened to consume her whole for the umpteenth time. And then, just when she thought she could not bear another second, the storm broke loose. An exclamation mark tilde a keening wail ripped free from her throat as her orgasm crashed through her like a tidal wave, leaving her limp and panting, her knees relaxing as she hung freely in the air while being suspended by the chains. She couldn't feel her body at all. It was as if her nerves and muscles had spent every wisp of energy and expelled every wisp of mana whenever she orgasmed. Now she literally felt as if she was floating in thin air, and never did she feel so light and free. She couldn't even collect her thoughts or make sense of her surroundings through her blurred vision. Asher released her hair, and grabbed her chin as he forced her eyes, cloudy with lust and desire, to look at him. Look at your broken bar. You felt the peak dozens of times, and yet your eyes are telling me they want more even if your body can't handle it anymore. Esther's chin quivered as she struggled to even focus on his words, as the passion she was feeling in her body was so fierce, it burned away even the darkest corners of her soul. Asher looked at her messy state with a look of amusement, knowing that one of the reasons she was so out of it was because she had never felt such things before. How could a person possibly know how to resist what they have never felt before? But even if she knew, it wouldn't make much difference in the outcome. Why don't you sleep it off and then we can talk about the things you are going to do for me now that you lost? A broken bar. Esther let out a weak groan, faintly hearing his words, though in the next moment, she felt a wave of exhaustion and fatigue crashing down on her, making her vision blurry and darker as her eyelids fully closed. Back at the foreboding edifice of Dreadthorn Castle, Lord Thorin strode purposefully onto the grand front porch, his stern visage set in stoic lines. With a dismissive flick of his wrist, he uttered the name Sabina in a clipped tone, betraying no emotion. Before long, the sleek form of his daughter materialized from within the shadows of the entrance hall, gliding soundlessly toward him. She executed a flawless curtsy before meeting her father's back with her gaze, her expression one of calm serenity. "Yes, father?" she queried softly, a slight upturn of her lips. Thorin regarded her coolly, his piercing pale red eyes narrowing slightly as he spoke. "Your mother a broken bar. She has been gone for quite some time. It isn't like her to ignore her other duties." There was a faint note of uncertainty lurking beneath his customary mask of indifference. Sabina raised an eyebrow, and the corners of her lips tempted her to giggle, yet she maintained her composure. "Fear not, father," she assured him, flashing a reassuring smile. "Mother tends to lose track of time whenever she becomes engrossed in her work. I dare say our future depends on such dedication, so perhaps she believes her other obligations may wait." Lord Thorin grunted noncommittally, acknowledging his daughter's wisdom with a brief nod, feeling that maybe there was no reason to doubt if Esther would get the job done. Meanwhile, within the ominous darkness of a lone tower, Esther fought desperately to restore her disheveled appearance after the tumultuous yet humiliating encounter with the alien with the nightmarish sword. Whenever the image of that thick, scalding hot member flashed in her mind, she winced, trying to rip apart that image, dreading it like a nightmare. She had never feared anyone or anything, yet that thing, a broken bar, it was the most terrifying weapon in her eyes that broke her will, more than she wanted to admit. Despite her best efforts, lingering traces of exhaustion weighed heavily upon her limbs, particularly around down there, which felt so sore and hot to the point she wished to immerse herself in a tub of ice-cold water. She couldn't handle the hot and sticky atmosphere in this tower anymore. However, no sooner had she managed to slip into her opulent dark blue gown than the unmistakable aroma of Asher's masculine scent invaded her nostrils, causing her heart to skip several beats. She stiffened involuntarily, recalling vividly each passionate moment shared between them, both those instigated by himself and those eagerly sought out by her body's wanton desires. From behind, Asher approached silently, attired in resplendent black robes that accentuated his imposing stature. Upon seeing him, Esther reflexively tensed further, averting her gaze in a futile attempt to hide the shameful and irate emotions roiling within her breast. Thinking about those words he made her shout in between and how he treated her like a brothel girl made her nerves roll on themselves. Amused by her reaction, Asher leaned in conspiratorially, whispering silkily, "There is no reason to feel ashamed or resentful for indulging in pleasures long denied. You know full well how much enjoyment you derived from our union, and deep down, I sense that your yearning for more remains unquenched. But fret not a broken bar, our business relationship has barely begun. But fret not a broken bar, our business relationship has barely begun," Asher said as the corners of his lips curved to form an unsettling smile. Upon hearing his words, Esther's emotions were a whirlwind, a maelstrom of anxiety, determination, and an unbidden flush of embarrassment that painted her cheeks a rosy hue. I want to renegotiate the terms and make a new contract with more favors from my house towards you, but I want to destroy the present one," she declared, her voice a mix of defiance and desperation, a gambit laid bare in the hopes of regaining some semblance of control. Asher's laughter, rich and unfettered, filled the space between them, a sound that made Esther's resolve waver and her brows knit together in cold frustration. His gaze, alight with amusement, bore into her, "You signed the contract, lady, nobody forced you, and now you will never be able to escape me." His words were a gilded cage, a declaration of power and possession that sent a shiver of dread down Esther's spine. She realized then, with a sinking heart, that she had ensnared herself in a web from which there was no escape. She was afraid of what might happen to her mind and body if he continued with whatever he had done to her before. Her entire house could be in danger if she gets compromised. She could only blame her confidence in believing that nobody could make her feel anything. If only she knew our broken bar, the last thing she would do was agree to those rules. But she clenched her fists, determined to find a way to make him lose, for the last thing she could do now was to give up. Asher smiled upon seeing despair and vain hope clouding her face, for he knew that she would have to let him warm her cold body whenever he wanted until she could actually make him lose 2 more times a broken bar, which she never can. Later, within the cold walls of the Dreadthorn Castle, Esther found herself seated in one of the cold, soft seats of the meeting hall. Her eyes, once icy and detached, now held a glazed look, a window to the turmoil that raged silently within. Even now, she was struggling to calm down her emotions, unable to focus, especially when thinking of the contract and the heat that raged within her. She didn't even realize she was unconsciously rubbing together her thighs as if to get rid of a certain throbbing sensation. Her hands clenched and unclenched rhythmically, feeling her inner struggle and the acute sense of failure that gnawed at her. Suddenly, the heavy doors to the hall creaked open, heralding the entrance of Thorin, his presence as cold and stoic as ever. His features were schooled into an expression of impassive scrutiny as he regarded Esther. "I wasn't expecting you to take this long to succeed. Nevertheless, we don't have to worry about it anymore," he stated. The weight of Thorin's words pressed down on Esther like a physical force, each syllable a stone added to the burden she already bore. Her heart, heavy with the gravity of her actions, beat a tumultuous rhythm against her chest, a drum of war against the silence of the hall. The truth of what transpired loomed over her, a specter too daunting to face. How could she reveal the depths of her failure, the peril she had woven around their house with threads of desperation and misjudgment? No. The full extent of the contract must remain her cross to bear. To disclose it could unleash consequences far beyond her ability to contain, especially with Thorin, whose reactions were as unpredictable as the storms that raged above their ancestral lands. He wouldn't hesitate to take extreme measures if he felt the house was in danger. The very notion of sharing one of their most guarded secrets with Asher was anathema to everything their house stood for. Their lineage was a fortress of silence, each secret a stone in its impenetrable walls, passed down through generations with a solemn vow, "No secret shall ever leave this house." The ancestors had decreed it, their words echoing through the ages. and the penalty for transgression was as absolute as it was final. Death, a broken bar in the worst possible way. Should she just reveal everything that happened, accept her punishment for her failure, and end this before it gets worse for her house? Yet, facing the prospect of her own mortality, Esther found herself entangled in a well of emotions previously foreign to her, where once the thought of death left her unmoved, a strategic calculation in the great game of power. Now it stirred within her a tumult of sentiment. She was not ready to depart this realm, not before ensuring the future of their house with a successor strong enough to wield its legacy. She had lots of things still left to teach Sabina Broken Bar, things Thorin might not be able to impart to her, nor would he have the time. Even if Edmund was a lost cause, there was still Jarius, who had potential but was too lazy to use it. She can still course-correct him and prevent him from becoming like his elder brother. Sabina will then have somebody to support her from within the house. Thorin's gaze upon her was a cold, sharpened blade, cutting through the silence with its intensity upon seeing her not responding to his words and instead sitting with her head lowered. His brows drew together, the lines of his face etched with concern and the dawning realization of something amiss. You failed, did you? His voice, a low rumble, broke the silence, carrying with it the weight of expectation and the shadow of disappointment. Esther rose, her movements a study in grace under pressure, her posture regal despite the turmoil that churned within. Meeting Thorin's gaze, she found herself at a crossroads of truth and necessity. To confess her failure openly and reveal the price they would have to pay would be the worst outcome for her, but if she doesn't a broken bar, how long can she keep it hidden? How long would she have to keep meeting him and experience all those things again? Her mind wasn't used to such chaotic thoughts, causing a storm within her, but she then briefly closed her eyes and held her breath, as her thoughts suddenly settled down and she knew what to do after weighing the cost of both decisions. Yes, a broken bar. Esther began calmly and added, I underestimated him, at least in the foreseeable future. I can't think of a way to make him kneel before us. It has only become harder now that he is stronger and too cunning for someone of his age. Thorin's face darkened while the atmosphere in the hall suddenly grew colder, making Esther hold her breath. How a broken bar? How did you become so incapable? This has never happened before. That alien has barely a tenth of your age and experience, and you still failed despite what is at stake here? Thorin asked, his low voice rumbling in the hall though his eyes were as calm as a pool. But he then added as his eyes shone with a dangerous light, I would have intervened if not for our kingdom's precarious situation, but now a broken bar, I can't see any other choice but to do whatever is necessary to protect our house's future. Esther's brows furrowed as she immediately shook her head. Don't. Just give me some more time. It's not too late. I can still turn this around. All I have to do is find his weakness, and I will find it. We still have time. By that time, we might find a better opportunity as well. Any alternative only puts our house at more risk than ever. Thorin narrowed his eyes, remaining silent for a couple moments before he finally spoke. Then so be it. We shall wait, but not for long. Esther felt her heart lighten, but at the same time her eyes became icier with determination, wanting to bring down Asher at any costs. If she doesn't, she won't be the only one who would lose everything, but for now, she had to figure out how to go behind Thorin's back and deliver the secret arts Asher wanted. She couldn't believe she was going against her house in by planning this. Under a sky cloaked in darkness, the Bloodwing mansion stood, its foreboding silhouette bathed in the eerie glow of the blood moon. Inside, the chamber of the princess consort was a stark contrast to the mansion's grandeur, a sanctuary marred by the turmoil of its occupant's heart. She lay upon her bed, a figure of distress, her gaze fixed on the ceiling above, lost in a tumult of worry and fury. Empty bottles of blood were littered around and on her bed. Thoughts of Oberon, her son, trapped in a living hell, twisted her heart, while the memory of Asher's demands ignited a fire of anger within her whenever she remembered it. How dare that vile brat blackmail her into becoming his slave? If only she could choke the life out of him with her own hands. Never in her life had she been looked down upon by anyone, let alone a junior. Suddenly, The stillness of the night was broken by a soft glow emanating from the table beside her. The sight-stone sphere, a conduit for storing and projecting messages across distances untold, began to illuminate the dim room with its arcane light. With a frown etching her features, Rebecca reached for the sphere, her heart pounding in anticipation and dread. As she made contact, the sphere pulsed, revealing a message from a secret channel that made her blood run cold. Lysandra's words, cruel and taunting, danced before her eyes, a spectral display of malice. "I told you I would make your son suffer for getting in my way. He kept calling out your name like a pathetic boy whose mother abandoned him. Even after everything we did to him." Anger and agony intertwined within Rebecca's heart, a venomous mix that threatened to overwhelm her senses. With a desperate swipe, she commanded the sphere to reveal more, and it obeyed, unfurling images into the air that materialized with devastating clarity. The images that appeared were a nightmare-given form, showcasing Oberon in torment, his plight rendered in heart-wrenching detail. "No. My Oberon. No." Rebecca's cry was a lance of pain, shattering the oppressive silence of the night. The intensity of her emotions unleashed a surge of power, the air within the room plummeting in temperature, doors and windows frosted over, the chill so profound that ice crystallized upon surfaces, encapsulating the room in a tomb of frost while her cry continued to echo throughout the room. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting long shadows across the cold stones of the eastern courtyard in Demonstone Castle. Rowena and Isola entered together, their faces tinged with a bit of redness, and their skin had a certain glow that made the look even more alluring. After a moment of heavy silence, Isola finally broke the tension. "Am I wrong to assume that you wanted to talk about Asher last night? He came to you as well. Didn't he?" Isola asked, clearing her throat. Rowena met Isola's gaze, her expression reserved, yet her eyes could barely contain a hint of embarrassment. Her crimson eyes darted around before settling on Isola once more. "Since you are asking. Then it can't only be me who felt something different about him, right?" she replied in a low voice. Isola nodded, wincing slightly as she recalled the events of the previous night. "I know our husband is the most charming man in the world, but after he came back from whatever business he had to take care of, I couldn't take my eyes off him. Something about him seems strangely different," she admitted, her voice tinged with embarrassment. "And his little dragon. It destroyed me before I could even realize it, despite how he gave it such an adorable name. I felt so numb and weak that I had to drink 2 potions just to get myself up." She smiled softly, adding, "But it felt like the best night I shared with him. What about you?" Isola felt her heart pounding even now as she remembered Asher suddenly entering her quarters in the middle of the night, possessing an alluring charm that made her even forget the drowsiness she had from working all day. But what truly caught her by surprise was when he revealed his little dragon that was far from little and the more like a forbidden weapon that consumed her soul and body for hours until she literally got knocked out, yet in a blissful way. Rowena blushed deeper at Isola's openness, finding it embarrassing to share the intimate details of her own encounter. All she could remember was feeling tired behind her desk when he suddenly appeared before her, swept her off her feet, and drained her of her essence countless times within her study hall. The strange thing was that despite feeling numb and weak, the more he ravaged her with his monstrous sword, the more she felt relaxed and blissful. Only in those moments, she felt like she could be herself and forget she was the queen and the burdens that came with it. She had initially decided not to indulge him and control her own feelings for a few days to teach him a lesson and to make sure he knew how to put a leash on his little dragon. But after he took her by surprise, her initial determination to punish him melted away, and she couldn't bring herself to refuse him. However, she couldn't help but feel surprised at Asher's stamina, given what had transpired between them. Even after all that, he still paid a visit to Isola. She hesitantly nodded, meeting Isola's gaze once more. "I could say the same, but," Rowena frowned, concern etching its way onto her face, "we can't let him get too arrogant after he surprised and overwhelmed us like that." Isola wryly smiled as she asked, Could this be because of far broken bar Nada? Isola already heard from Asher about what happened between him and Nada. She felt touched and sad upon hearing what the two of them had to go through in the Tower of Torment. After knowing that Nada, in the image of Selene, had sacrificed herself so many times for Asher indirectly, she felt that Nada was worthy of his love, especially after learning that Nada didn't ask him anything despite seeing Asher remaining unaffected by radiant mana. Any other person would have caused a huge ruckus or blackmailed Asher or feel angry enough to make sure this world would crucify him for having some connection to radiant mana. And so she felt happy for Asher since she felt he needed all the love he could get to prevent him from falling back to the person he was when he woke up in this world for the first time. But she did feel worried since Nada was married and she was the lady of House Valentine. There could only be problems to deal with in the future, and if their relationship gets exposed, then it will put both Asher and Nada in serious trouble, which even Rowena would struggle to help them. She knew Rowena was feeling worried about the same thing, and if he might bed another married woman, it wouldn't be an issue if he simply slept with them or had a one-night stand, but it was a whole nother problem if he fell in love with them, for she knew Asher would never let go of a woman once he had feelings for them. And so Isola gently held Rowena's hand and said with a soft, reassuring smile, "You don't have to worry, now that we, especially you, made things clear to him. He won't go after any married woman again. Even what happened wasn't entirely his fault. We both know that it's hard to control our hearts." Rowena softly sighed as she nodded and gripped Isola's hand as she said with concern in her eyes, "I know, it's just that our kingdom is facing a perilous future. We would need as many allies as we can, including the ones we don't like. Asher has only been the king for a short while. He wasn't born or raised as we were. It will take some time before he understands that we aren't free to do everything as our heart pleases. A broken bar not when our kingdom is in danger." Isola's gaze became focused as she understood what Rowena was talking about. She then said with confidence in her azure eyes, "Fret not, for I believe Asher has only grown to care for his duties after his return. You must have also noticed that after his return, he has already initiated plans for reaping and using Nada's help to strengthen our relations with our allies. Maybe it's not all bad that he and Nada got closer." Rowena's eyes shifted upon hearing Isola mention his reaping plans. "About his reaping plans, a broken bar, did he tell you anything else?" "All he told me was that he might spend less time here and more time among the humans to grow his cult and do whatever it takes to weaken the humans while strengthening himself. I am just worried how he is going to do all that on his own in such a short while. Even if I ask him, he would just tell me not to worry." Isola gave a confident nod as she subtly smiled. "We both know only he stands the highest chance of coming up with miracles. We should just let him do what he does best while we can do everything possible to support him." However, inwardly, Isola wasn't free of anxiety as she knew that Asher was also planning his vengeance while reaping. She could only pray and hope that nothing bad won't happen after he walked into a world where he would only be surrounded by his worst enemies. At the shadow of the ominous black tower titled as Hellbringer's Tower loomed large as Esther approached, its spires piercing the sky like a dark blade. The calm that had settled over her heart during her journey began to fracture, each step towards the tower echoing the tumult of memories it housed. The air around seemed to thicken with anticipation, or perhaps it was the weight of certain events, of decisions made within those stone walls that now pressed upon her. With a deep breath, she sought the tranquility that had eluded her, closing her eyes for a moment to still the storm within. Upon opening them, she stepped into the tower, the boundary between the outside world and the realm of shadows that Asher had made his own. "You are slightly early. Were you looking forward to something? There is no shame in saying yes like you did before." Asher's voice, laced with a mixture of amusement and challenge, cut through the silence, emanating from the shadows. He stepped into view, his presence charming. This secluded haven stood apart from the bustling life of cities and towns, a sanctuary for his darker pursuits. Shielded from prying eyes, Esther's composure faltered for a moment at the sight of him, the memories of past encounters stirring an unbidden tumult within her. Yet, She quickly regained her icy demeanor, her gaze sharpening as she met his. "Did you call me here to waste both of our time or to let me give you what you wanted? I have other duties to attend to, and you wouldn't want people to start asking questions, do you?" Her voice was a blade of ice, cutting through the air with precision. She wanted to make sure that he would understand that he couldn't just call her whenever he wanted. He can't be that stupid to think he can have her at his beck and call every hour. Asher's laughter, deep and resonant, filled the space between them. "Don't you worry, I will make sure that whenever I call you, it will be at impeccable timing, but as the king, it's not like I can't assign people to take over your duties whenever I need you, can't I?" Esther's pulse once again quickened briefly as she couldn't even tell if he was serious or trying to unsettle her. However, to her relief, Asher added, "For now, let's talk business. Show me what you brought." At his prompt to discuss their business, Esther's gesture summoned a dark blue coffin, materializing with a whisper of power. The coffin, an artifact shrouded in mystery, appeared before them, its appearance enough to raise Asher's eyebrows in intrigue as he took a peep at what was inside. Under the flickering torchlight of the shadowed chamber, Asher leaned forward with an air of intrigue to inspect the contents of the coffin, his gaze sharpening as it fell upon the humanoid form resting within. The preserved corpse, if it could be called that, bore no distinct facial features, resembling a wax model more than anything human, yet unmistakably holding the shape of a person. It looked androgynous and not distinctively male or female. "What is this weird corpse doing here?" Asher's voice echoed slightly in the chamber, a note of confusion threading through his otherwise composed demeanor. Esther, standing a measured distance away, watched him with an inscrutable expression. "Isn't it obvious that you can't walk around among the humans in your body? But if you want to, then you need a human body or something that looks like one. This corpse isn't a real corpse. It is a foundation shell created using the necroessence of multiple powerful hunter corpses to reduce the chances of failure," she explained, her voice betraying none of the tension that knotted her stomach. With a casual flick of her wrist, another dark blue coffin materialized beside the first, emphasizing the gravity of her next words. "Failure? How bad are the chances?" Asher's inquiry was sharp, his focus undivided as he sought to understand the full extent of the risk. "The stronger you are, the higher the chances of failure. There is a reason that the strongest ones in our house do not try this. After all, since this shell is made from hunter corpses, there will be trace amounts of radiant mana lingering, and it might cause a backlash that could cause you to fail. Worst case ... you will die, especially since your bloodline isn't suitable for this, unlike ours," Esther replied, her tone grave, the underlying warning clear in her voice. Despite her composed exterior, part of her hoped desperately for his arrogance to be his undoing, dying like a fool, but she knew that it would be a bad outcome for her as well since she and her house would be held responsible. Expecting her words to serve as a deterrent, Esther waited for Asher to reconsider, to retreat from the brink of such a dangerous gambit, and that way she could avoid sharing such a powerful and ancient secret out of her house and allow her to completely focus on making him void the contract. Asher hummed before he nodded and said, as his eyes shone with a determination that seemed to ignite the very air around him, "Let's do it," he declared. Asher felt that since he was even able to survive and master the tome of the Forbidden Nightmare Sword, which had runes made to withstand radiant mana, he should be able to do this as well. He also knew about the mysterious fact that he could at least channel the radiant mana of his past self. Esther's frown deepened, the temperature in the room seeming to drop with her mood. "Did you not hear what I said? There is little to no chance that you will survive this. I can't let myself or my house get held responsible for your death." Her voice was a cold blade, slicing through the tension that filled the air between them. Asher's scoff cut sharply through her warning. "It's not my problem. That is just a risk you will have to swallow since you got yourself into this." His tone was dismissive, as if he couldn't be least bothered about it. As Esther initiated the ritual, her hands raised, dark blue tendrils of mana bridged the gap between the two coffins while a brief humming sound began to fill the dark hall. Inside his coffin, Asher braced himself, his world narrowing to the immediate and intense sensation of his consciousness expanding, reaching out into the void that connected him to the foundational shell. The transition was jarring. Asher found himself plunged into a cold, dead space, a realm of pitch-black darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. Then came the pain, an excruciating, all-encompassing agony that coursed through his being. It was as if countless needles were piercing him, carving the mana circuit into the empty shell. Still, his original body convulsed violently, a silent scream in the darkness, and yet he couldn't hear his own voice, let alone open his mouth. The initial agony of the mana circuit being etched into the shell had been harrowing, a torment he had braced himself against. Yet, what followed was an ordeal of a wholly unexpected nature, a manipulation of his physical form that defied his expectations. As the process progressed, his avatar began to undergo a metamorphosis, its skin, muscles, and bones contorting and reshaping while its corpse-like skin began to change shade and began to gain some color and a hint of redness to its skin. Yet Asher felt as if his own body was being molded, as though he were no more substantial than clay in the hands of a capricious sculptor. The pain, a vicious mix of stretching and molding, rivaled the torment of the mana circuit's inscription. He couldn't help but curse Esther silently, who purposefully let him think that carving the mana circuit was the only painful part of this procedure. Esther had her brows subtly raised upon seeing that the procedure was proceeding without any hiccups so far and so swiftly. Even when she did it in the past, it wasn't this quick and took a lot of pain and concentration. It was one of the procedures she hated the most and, thus, was less inclined to use unless necessary. Just what was this alien made of? How was he capable of defying all sorts of expectations? Amidst the onslaught of pain, a curious thought flickered through Asher's mind. How would he appear once this ordeal was over? His demonic visage, once so defining of his identity, was being transposed onto a human form. Would the humans be able to recognize him, or would the transformation render him unrecognizable, a stranger even to himself? If it was the former, the prospect of needing to conceal his identity further, to don disguises atop this newly minted form, loomed as an unwelcome necessity. He had hoped for a seamless transition, a blending into the human realm without the need for such subterfuges. Eventually, the torment ebbed away, giving rise to a stinging sensation that permeated his entire being. It was a discomfort of a lesser degree, yet it made Asher wince as he realized it must be the radiant mana within the shell that Esther talked about. But surprisingly, it was the last thing that hurt him, and slowly, the sting began to fade, retreating until he could feel his eyes and found the strength to open them. With a soft pop, the door of the coffin swung open, and slowly, a tall, muscular human figure rose while Esther's eyes widened as she unconsciously stared at this naked human figure. As Asher unfolded from the confines of the coffin, stepping into the realm of the living once more, albeit in a form not his own, Esther found herself having her lips part on their own. Her eyes inadvertently wandered towards the seemingly harmless meaty sword hanging between his legs, not knowing whether to feel surprised or not to see that its size and girth also got successfully transferred to his avatar. But the moment she felt a hint of warmth creeping up her cheeks, she reeled in her thoughts, feeling annoyed at herself for letting herself get so distracted easily despite it resembling that of a human. Her gaze snapped back to his face, as the success of the procedure settled in her mind finally. You really managed to do it. The words tumbled from her lips, edged with disbelief. Here stood a man, an alien, not of her bloodline, who had traversed the perilous path of transferring consciousness and mana circuit into a human shell without faltering. This feels a bit weird yet familiar, Asher mumbled as he surveyed his new hands, his features, a look of curiosity painting his expression as he encountered his reflection on the coffin glass. His human visage, mirroring the demonic one he knew so well, stared back at him, same yet entirely different, with startling white hair cascading down to his waist. He was astonished to see that his appearance resembled almost the same as his demon body, except he looked human. It felt kind of strange yet familiar. As if he was human again, but he felt he would have to shorten his hair since only hipsters would grow hair this long back on Earth. Yet he was satisfied to see that his height, muscles, and especially his little dragon had the same shape and size. However, what caught his attention was the color of his eyes. They were a radiant gold, unlike the dark yellow of his original body, almost the same as when his eyes glowed with the power of his mana as a hunter. For a moment, he felt as if he was staring into his past self. His gaze then drifted to his original form, lying still within the other coffin, connected to him by the dark blue tendrils of mana that seemed to form a sort of connection between the two. How long are you going to stand without any clothes like that? You can now return to your original body now that the transfer has been a success, Esther coldly asked, not wanting to get distracted again. Asher, still marveling at his new existence, voiced his awe and curiosity. This is mind-blowing. I am literally standing in a different body, a broken bar, a human one. Why can't you people use this art in our world? Imagine using it and having a second life. He pondered aloud, the strategic possibilities unfolding in his mind. Esther's response was a low, tired sigh. The only reason you are able to use your avatar here is because I am maintaining a connection between it and your body. The moment you even get a few meters away from your original body, the connection will be lost, and you will return to your original body. This secret art is only meant to be used during reaping, since the devils are doing the hard part of transferring your soul into your avatar. Esther then went on to explain other details regarding his avatar to make sure he won't end up getting caught or dying in his avatar and result in her house getting exposed. Asher's understanding deepened, the complexities of his new form revealing themselves in layers, each explanation from Esther shedding light on the intricate details of his avatar. After a while, Asher was back in his original demon body and was staring at the coffin with his lifeless avatar. He had a satisfied smile on his face, especially after seeing that his little dragon's prowess was similar even in his avatar, and he had to thank Esther for helping him realize it with her mouth. Thanks to her inexperience, especially with any sort of emotions, he felt it was quite fun and amusing to slowly break her and use her to have a hold on her house. However, shifting his focus back to the coffin, he snapped his fingers as he stored it away in his damn dimension while feeling that he should think of a way to send this coffin to Earth. Should he store it in a hidden place through a quest and tell Amelia or those Japanese girls to fetch it for him? But his solitude was abruptly shattered by the sound of sharp, deliberate footsteps echoing against the stone floor. He turned, his gaze drawn towards the entrance, anticipation flickering in his eyes. Through the door swept a figure, the very embodiment of allure and power, clad in an elegant black gown that hugged her voluptuous form. Rebecca made her entrance, the dress's design accentuating her deep cleavage. The fabric moved like liquid shadow with each step she took, a dance of darkness and grace. What a pleasant surprise, or maybe not a surprise. I knew you would come back to me, Asher remarked, a playful yet challenging undertone in his voice as he took in the sight of Rebecca striding towards him. His words, however, fell on deaf ears, or so it seemed. Rebecca's approach was silent, her expression darkening, her eyes alight with a deadly coldness that belied the calm of her steps. The air around her seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken fury. What happened? Are you so shocked that you forgot to speak after seeing certain things? Asher's scoff carried a cold edge, an attempt to provoke a response, to pierce the armor of her silence. His taunt, however, was met not with words but with a palpable shift in the atmosphere, making him frown. The hall, already a cavern of shadows, seemed to constrict around them as a chilling, sharp, killing intent emanated from Rebecca. With a fluid motion, her hands wove through the air, summoning forth dozens of icy projectiles of blood, each one a harbinger of vengeance. Bleed for me. The words, torn from Rebecca's lips in a vengeful cry, filled the space between them with an echo of wrath. The projectiles, sharp as the coldest winter and as deadly as the darkest thoughts, hurtled towards Asher from all sides, their aim true and their intent meant to paint the floor with his blood. Amidst the eeriness of the dark hall, the atmosphere was heavy with tension and power. The moment Rebecca's icy blood projectiles honed in on Asher, he vanished, a mere whisper in the air, only to reappear behind her with the silence and swiftness of a shadow. "What the hell do you think you are doing? Trying to kill your own king? Are you tired of your life already?" Asher's voice, laced with disbelief and a chilling edge, filled the space between them. His dark yellow eyes burned with an intensity that could scorch souls, a cold light illuminating the darkness of the hall, yet he didn't seem the least bit anxious. Rebecca slowly turned, her movements measured and deliberate. The twisted smile that graced her lips was a stark contrast to the dark intent that clouded her expression. "People will only thank me even if they came to know that I killed our traitorous king, but all I care about is that I will just kill you and reanimate your corpse to make you bring Oberon back to me," she declared, her voice a chilling echo of her resolve. "Have you truly gone mad?" Asher's incredulity was palpable, his bafflement at her audacity and resolve filling the air between them. "Mad? I have always been mad," she retorted, her words chilling the very air. With a casual flick of her wrist, a staff as dark as the depths of space itself materialized in her grip, its icy blue gem glinting menacingly. The air around them grew colder as she swiftly aimed the staff at Asher, unleashing a beam of dark blue energy at him. Instantly, frost began to rapidly consume him, his movements slowing to a crawl as if he was getting frozen while trying to shield himself, only to find himself slowed down significantly, transformed into nothing more than an ice sculpture. A wicked smile graced Rebecca's lips as she approached the frozen figure of Asher. "Now, I will make you suffer at least twice what you made him go through. I'll kill off each of your organs, one by one until you are nothing but an empty husk. Then, I'll use your undead body to destroy everyone you've ever cared for until those who are left could have no choice but to destroy whatever is left of you. After that, your soul will be purged in the depths of Tartarus, and by then, it will be too late as you regret the pain you made me endure." Her words hung in the air, a dark vow that resonated with the depth of her anguish and fury, but the stillness that followed her words was shattered as the ice encasing Asher started to crack, the cracks spreading like spider webs across a frozen pond. His once lifeless eyes now gleamed a menacing emerald hue as ghostly tendrils of mist seeped outward. The sight caused Rebecca's expression to sour as she reached out. "Don't bother trying," she scoffed, raising her staff to reinforce the ice. "I will just boom." Her words were cut short as a near-shattering blast erupted from the ice prison, shattering it into a million glittering shards. A dark green light engulfed Asher's body while shards of ice flew in every direction, and a blast of dark green energy erupted from within. Rebecca, caught off guard, was sent hurtling through the air like a ragdoll, slamming into the far wall with a sickening thud. Her staff clattered to the ground, just out of reach, while her gown was singed and the fabric burned here and there. Asher stepped out, free from his frozen prison. Skeletal structures, reminiscent of burnt black diamonds, formed his body, yet these bones pulsed with malevolent life, veined with vivid dark green flame. He stood tall, radiating pure power as he took one deliberate step after another, advancing on her, his steps echoing ominously on the cold marble floor. "You've made a grave mistake, you crazy bitch," his voice rumbled forth like thunder with an ominous grace. "You should have finished me off when you had the chance, a broken bar, when I was nothing but a helpless and soulless cripple." His bony fists clenched and unclenched, green energy crackling around them. Rebecca coughed, wincing as she tried to push herself up, only to be shocked upon seeing him walking towards her with an aura that overwhelmed hers by a huge margin. Just a couple seconds ago, his aura was nowhere near this strong. "Yug!" Rebecca's guttural cry of rage filled the air as she forced herself to her feet, her body trembling with pain and fury. However, before she managed to reach her trusted staff, Asher lunged forward, launching his fiery ring blade straight at her hand. Schlick! It sliced through flesh and bone with terrifying precision, sending her severed hand tumbling to the ground. Horror etched itself on Rebecca's face as she stared at the gruesome sight of her own detached limb, crimson liquid spurting everywhere. Her handless arm gushed blood, but the next moment, she paid it no heed. "Yag!" Enraged, she raised her other hand to strike at him, but before she could act, tendrils of dark energy erupted from the shadows, coiling around her like the cold, suffocating grip of death itself. The shadows tightened, immobilizing her in place, and she could only watch helplessly as Asher's leg shot out, his boot colliding with her stomach. Urgh! A searing pain erupted in her stomach. The force of Asher's fiery kick drove the air from her lungs, and her vision blurred as she doubled over. The shadow roots held her in place, not allowing her any respite as she gasped for air. Her vision swam with agony. Asher's blazing skull loomed over her, his hollow eyes a chilling glow of emerald. "Now you will think twice before pissing me off," he snarled. Before she could muster a retort, he grabbed her by the silver locks of her hair and slammed her mercilessly into the cracked wall. The force of the impact sent more debris cascading down, the wall splintering further around her. Her already bruised body jolted with agony as her body connected with the unforgiving surface. Asher released his grip, and Rebecca's limp form stumbled back before tumbling to the floor, her body a tangled mass of pain and broken bones. She lay there, struggling to catch her breath, her nose a bloody mess, as cuts and bruises marred her once proud features. Through blurred vision, she saw the most hated bastard looming above her, his flames extinguishing as he returned to his original form. His voice was ice cold as he spoke the words that chilled her to her very core. "You underestimated me. I was being patient all this time, not because I was scared of you or your status. It's because you weren't worth too much of my attention all along, and you still have some use for me, but now you have exhausted every last bit of my patience, so I am going to stop treating you like a princess." The words faded away as darkness crept in, stealing away her consciousness. Asher looked at her unconscious figure and shook his head, feeling that she was even crazier than Sabina. Though it was now time to finalize his plans for her, the main reason he was able to quickly overwhelm her was not only due to the boost from his rupture of the damned and Doomfall's strength but also the nightmare surge ability he recently gained. He never thought his cock would give him a power boost one day. Time passed by. The only sound in the silent hall was the crackling of the dying torches. Rebecca's body was motionless, her chest rising and falling shallowly, her eyes closed, as if the world round her had vanished. Suddenly, her eyelids fluttered, and she gasped as memories of what she remembered last flooded her mind. She was still in the same dark hall, but something was different. Her limbs were bound by chains, her wrists and ankles straining against the unforgiving metal. Confusion clouded her mind as she tried to free herself, but the restraints left her suspended in the air, her toes just barely touching the frigid floor. She was dismayed to find her mana circuit sealed, and the chains were too strong for her to break using physical force. That was fast. Asher's voice drifted through the shadows, and she turned her head to see him emerging from the gloom. As expected, a vampire like you heals quite fast. Except for your hand, it's not like you can grow it back. He sneered, gesturing to her stump of a wrist. Rage filled Rebecca's heart, and she spat out, "Release me right now, you traitor. You can't kill me, not unless you want a civil war on your hands." Asher chuckled and pressed a finger to his lips. "Shhh." His figure then suddenly dashed towards her as he grabbed her hair roughly, yanking her head back, and exposing her pale slender neck. "Take off your filthy hand, you bastard." Rebecca glowed at him spitefully as she clenched her jaw. "Traitor? How bold of you to accuse your king like that. Do you know the punishment for doing so?" Asher asked, his lips almost touching her ear. Rebecca hissed as she said, her contempt palpable, "I don't have to care. I know you are in cahoots with that draconian bitch." I felt it strange that she cared for your life a bit too much in the middle of a battlefield. I wonder what Rowena is going to think when she learns that you love sleeping with our enemies. "You have proof that I am sleeping with her?" Asher asked with a cold, amused smile, to which Rebecca pressed her lips together before she spat out, "I know you are the one telling Lysandra to torture my son and made her send those projections to me. I will demand to have your memories checked and you will be done for." Asher's grip tightened, and his voice was ice cold. "You must already know that Rowena and I share a bond that goes far beyond most husband and wife in this world, including yours. It's not like you can ever comprehend such a bond. She would never demand that no matter what a cunt like you says." even without knowing what your extremely loyal son did during my journey to the Draconese kingdom. Without any solid proof, you can't do shit. Instead, you should worry about having your or your son's memories checked if anything suspicious comes to light." Rebecca grunted in anger and frustration as she knew he was right, but she never expected he was already so powerful that he defeated her with such ease. How could that be possible when he was only a low-level soul devourer? "But if you really think you are right about me having a connection with Lysandra, I should then probably tell her to put your poor son out of his misery." Saying so, Asher took out his whisper stone while Rebecca's eyes widened and shook. Rebecca's eyes burned with seething rage as she watched Asher casually raise the whisper stone in his hand towards his lips. "No, don't you dare!" Her vehement outburst made Asher pause as he looked at her with a smile. "If you dare me not to, then the more inclined I feel to do it. Perhaps you might want to reiterate what you really want to say." His voice was silk, smooth, and mocking, each word a barbed hook that wrapped around her pride. Rebecca gritted her teeth as her face flushed in anger and frustration, knowing that he was indirectly demanding her to beg. "You don't want to?" Asher asked with a tilt of his head and added as he activated the whisper stone, "Fine then, please. Don't." The words barely escaped her lips, a whisper torn from the very heart of her being, each syllable a piece of her pride grumbling to dust. The very idea of her son in pain, or worse, the image of his lifeless body, was more than she could bear. Knowing how Oberon kept calling out for her while he was tortured only made her feel like she had failed him. She wasn't there when he needed her the most. Tears of frustration, pain, and helplessness clouded her eyes, yet she held them back, for she could not make herself appear weak before this scum. Asher's amusement was palpable as he toyed with the whisper stone, his thumb hovering over its surface. "That's more like it," he whispered. "Now, let's discuss my terms." Rebecca raised her head, her eyes burning with fury. "You bastard," she hissed, "what do you want from me?" Asher coldly smiled as he chuckled. "Don't tell me you already forgot what I demanded from you in exchange for saving your son's life. It's not like I am running a charity here, especially not for someone like you and your son." Rebecca's left hand clenched into a fist until it turned a sickly white. "If you want to kill me a broken bar, I will let you kill me, or I will just kill myself or broken bar as long as you rescue him." Rebecca felt that the worst thing that could happen to her was becoming this rascal's slave. He might even use her to hurt Oberon for revenge, and that terrified her more than anything. She would rather die than let anything happen to Oberon because of her. At least once he gets rescued, she can send him off to a safe place, far from this bastard, and Oberon will be safe for the rest of his life. Asher laughed before he shook his head and said in a mocking tone, "Or, how motherly of you to try and sacrifice your life for your son, but you don't get to escape your fate that easily. Death is the last thing I want for you." Rebecca's face became taut upon realizing that he was far more obsessed with making her and Oberon pay. Asher's eyes burned with an eerie, cold fire as he added, "All those years, you let me suffer and laughed while your son tortured me to his heart's content while plotting to make your son marry my woman. This is ignoring the fact that you tried to kill me just a couple minutes ago and threatened to hurt my women. You think I am going to forget all that and let you die that easily? I am the one going to make you suffer, and even if you shed tears of regret or beg me to stop a broken bar, I won't." Rebecca's pale red eyes shook upon feeling the intensity of his resentment that sent a shiver down her spine. "You are a monster, a broken bar, a fiend, a broken bar." Asher clutched her face firmly as he leaned forward to whisper, "It takes one to know one. It's pathetic to make yourself sound like a hypocrite." He then took a step back and shrugged. "So what is it going to be? As they say, a mother should also be responsible for their son's crimes. I will let off Oberon as long as you take his place and accept punishment on his behalf as well." Rebecca blinked her eyes upon hearing his words. Will he really let off Oberon? She lowered her head as she contemplated what she should do for Oberon. "Or do you want to let him rot away and die miserably? I don't think he is going to last more than a few days under such cruel treatment, or maybe even a day. You know how the Draconians are. I will also give you back your hand." and you can reattach it once you return home. His offer, laced with a faux benevolence, was a venom masked as a remedy, a salvation wrapped in ultimatums. Slowly, Rebecca raised her head, the chains clinking softly in the oppressive silence. Her gaze, once a tempest of red fury, now simmered with a hatred so pure it threatened to ignite the very air between them. Each word she spoke was a dagger wrapped in velvet. Only on two conditions. Asher raised one of his brows. How bold of you to make demands in your pathetic state. Still, let me hear what those conditions are first. Rebecca harumphed before she narrowed her eyes and said, you can't ever make me hurt Oberon or hurt him a broken bar, not more than what you have already done to him. Asher shrugged and said, I can put up with that. That traitorous rat is quite lucky to have a loving mother like you. What's the last one? Rebecca furrowed her brows and answered, my last condition is that you can never demand me to reveal any of my memories to you or anyone. I don't care if you order me to clean your feet, but I don't want you poking in my head. Asher's lips curved slowly before laughing, making Rebecca frown and add, if you can't agree to that a broken bar you better kill me now. Asher's laughter slowly died down as he looked into her eyes and said with a look of suspicion, you are that desperate to protect your memories? I wonder what little secrets you are hiding in there which are more important than your son? Asher truly found it surprising that she wasn't willing to compromise on this condition despite Oberon's life hanging in the balance. That is none of your business. These two are the only conditions I have, and I won't give in to your demands if you refuse even one of them, Rebecca said in a cutting tone, her gaze frigid. He never expected her to care about something more than Oberon or a broken bar. Could it be related to him as well? Perhaps it is the secrets of her house. Though she didn't strike him as the kind who cares about her duties and responsibilities towards her house, unlike her sister, Asher could only guess, though he felt it was a bummer since he planned to make her show him her memories and see if she had anything to do with Rowena's mother's death. He was also hoping to find out the weaknesses of House Thorn and any other secrets she might know, but he could see it in her eyes that if he refused any of her conditions, she would definitely choose death above all. He couldn't think of anything else to make her bend completely. Not now. Still a broken bar he wasn't prepared to completely give up. Nothing was set in stone. Fine, it's not like I care about your little secrets more than whatever I have planned for you, Asher said with a casual shrug, making Rebecca slowly release her breath, as if in relief. She had prepared herself for the worst, though even if he did accept her conditions, it was not like her situation was that much better. I want a blood oath contract to be signed between us. Your words can never be trusted, Rebecca said with a scowl. Speak for yourself, but if that is going to make you feel better, a broken bar saying so. Asher took out a blood oath contract, quickly inscribed the conditions, and signed it with his blood before showing it to Rebecca, who carefully read every word. To her surprise, he listed all the conditions just as she said without leaving any loopholes. While she was expecting him to be cunning with the words, feeling reassured by the conditions, she reluctantly and grudgefully let a drop of her blood pierce out of her skin and drop onto the contract, finalizing the contract before it disappeared into nothingness. Asher said with a cold smile, now that your conditions have been agreed to. It's time to make you my slave. Just what was he going to make her do as his slave? Her heart thudded against her chest as 100 scenarios poured into her mind. Before Rebecca could react or say anything, he moved with blinding speed, appearing behind her back in an instant. With a rough tug, he tore the fabric of her black dress from her back, revealing the shapely and smooth skin of her back. You, Rebecca gasped, her face flushing with shame and anger upon feeling her back getting exposed to the cold air. Even though she wasn't physically hurt, she felt like he tore open a part of her dignity. Asher's laugh was icy. Don't act so surprised, you must know better than anyone how a slave seal is applied. Saying so, he slammed his palm onto her bare back, and a dark green light engulfed her, making her wince in pain as her cries echoed through the hall. Don't bother resisting, you signed the contract, and now a broken bar you are mine, Asher whispered beside her ear as she gritted her teeth. Dark green lines spread over her back, making Rebecca wince harder in pain while feeling her body get hotter. She could feel scorching chains wrapping around her body and mind, making her realize that her freedom and dignity were being stripped gradually. Not long after, her painful grunts gradually began to die down, occasionally missing content. Please report errors in time. Chapter 487 A Slave's Initiation Ritual. Rebecca's body dripped with sweat, her heavy chest heaving as she panted heavily, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. The dark green light that had consumed her faded away, revealing her flushed and glistening form. Asher made sure to enslave her body and mind using his scorching chains, yet he didn't extend his chains toward her memories. If he tried to force it, she would know and try to reject it. The slave crest on her back glowed a brief, malevolent green before vanishing into her skin, leaving only the stinging humiliation of its presence. The weight of her newfound servitude pressed down on her like a leaden cloak, suffocating her very being. Asher walked up to her, a twisted smirk on his face. He grabbed her chin roughly and tilted her head upwards. Now, you're my near-broken bar slave. Rage and humiliation boiled in Rebecca's eyes as she glared at him, her body still tingling from the searing pain of the slave seal's activation. I will kill you, a broken bar, no matter how long I would have to wait, she hissed. Asher's smirk only deepened. You will never be able to hurt a hair on my body for the rest of your life. His hand trailed down her jawline, sending shivers down her spine, and downwards, over her exposed collarbone, and towards her deep cleavage. Do you know what most female slaves do to please their masters for the first time? It's like their initiation ritual. Rebecca's face flushed a crimson red, knowing what he was hinting at. I hope you rot in Tartarus, you bastard. Looks like a slave like you needs some proper training on how to talk to her master. Before she could react, Asher's hand shot forward and roughly tore the front of her black gown, fabric shredding as it gave way to reveal her trembling, naked, supple body. Rebecca grunted in a mixture of rage and shame as her voluptuous breasts bounced free, the cool air brushing against her heated skin. Asher's hands, hot and hungry, raked over her curves, pausing at the heaving mounds of her exposed breasts. Wow, you have the biggest breasts I have ever seen. It looks like you had at least a couple of children at a time for them to grow this big, he muttered, his voice a mixture of awe and crude humor. Rebecca winced as his warm fingers dipped into her breasts, gnashing her teeth together upon having her bare breasts violated by this alien bastard. Asher's heated gaze wandered over her voluptuous, sweat-sheened body, his eyes drinking in the alluring curves that defied her age, her hourglass figure, lush hips, and perky huge breasts heaving with each ragged breath she took only made the fruits of her motherhood stand out. Despite having voluptuous curves, her body was toned just enough. Her skin, though blemished with the passage of time, had a sensual sheen in the dim light, like a fine wine that only grew more intoxicating with age. He found himself transfixed by the way her body reacted to his touch, the goosebumps that bloomed on her skin, the involuntary shudders that tracked her frame, and the way her pink nipples hardened under his rough touch as he tugged at them. Why was she so easily sensitive to his touch? He knew she had a bombshell body, the most alluring one among all the senior women he knew, yet looking at her naked figure made him realize he underestimated the allure of her body. If not for her crazy attitude and her strength, he was sure men would have been swarming over to claim her as their own. Or, of course, she must be used to having a good time by dominating men under her pussy before killing them off. However, Asher was surprised to see that she didn't even have a single strand of hair to adorn her secret cave. Based on the custom here, shouldn't all married women stop shaving down there? Or was she that much of a rebel that she didn't care for customs? What do we have here? He mumbled, his voice thick with lust as he knelt down to be eye level with her exposed cave. So wet, so ready for me, aren't you, my slave? Were you lusting for me this much, even after what happened to your son? Aren't you quite the slutty mother? Rebecca clenched her eyes shut, her face a mask of humiliation. I'll kill you for this, you scum, she hissed, but her voice was weaker than before as the heat radiating over her body was paralyzing some of her nerves. Asher chuckled, his breath hot against her quivering folds. "The more you want to kill me, the more I want a taste of you," he whispered, before running a single finger along her slick slit, eliciting a strangled moan from her lips. HNNG exclamation mark tilde s stop it tilde, she whimpered, her body trembling with both arousal and shame. "Yeah, broken bar, I'll never submit to you." Asher's response was a low, throaty chuckle as he dipped his head, his warm breath ghosting over her aching center. "We'll see about that." Without another warning, his tongue plunged into her depths, his skilled oral ministrations sending shockwaves of pleasure through her body. An exclamation mark tilde Rebecca's body arched in the air, her hand clenching the chain above her head as Asher's skilled tongue danced against her most sensitive parts. His tongue seemed to know every right spot to touch, every flick, every suck, sending her closer to the edge of sanity. Each moan that escaped her lips felt like a betrayal, but she couldn't help it as this intense heat grew within and consumed her. "You're surprisingly delicious despite being a bitch," he whispered, his words vibrating against her swollen folds, only heightening her senses. "I can't wait to taste every inch of you." Asher literally felt more thirsty after tasting her sweet, cold nectar that was warming up nicely. "No, stop exclamation mark tilde HNNNG exclamation mark tilde," she moaned, her body trembling with the effort to resist the overwhelming sensation. She couldn't believe she was making such dirty sounds and feeling the loss of control of her body under the hands of the man she hated the most. What would Oberon think if he learned that she couldn't even control her own body against this bastard? Asher chuckled, his fingers now teasing her swollen clitoris as he continued his assault on her senses. "You tell me to stop, but you are grinding your pussy against my mouth as if begging for more, and you expect me to believe your words over your body? That's not true." HNNNNG exclamation mark tilde Rebecca's world shattered around her, as her body arched in the air, her hands clenching the chains above her head as Asher's skilled tongue and fingers worked their magic. His tongue and fingers moved in tandem, sending her hurtling towards a precipice she never knew existed. Her moans, both of pleasure and humiliation, echoed off the damp walls of the hall. She felt like she was going to pee, but she knew what was really about to happen. I can't, I'm going to." Her climax hit her like a bolt of lightning, crashing through her supple body, tearing her apart, and sewing her back together anew. Her inner walls clenched, craving something to fill the void he'd created within her. Her cries of ecstasy filled the hall before a flood of shame and anger settled down on her shivering body.